Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching second part of What If Kid Naruto Pranked Uchiha Clan too hard. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
Whispered, "Naruto, wake up," into the blonde's ear. Naruto shivered at the feeling, and his eyes opened and automatically adapted to the dim lighting around him. Naruto looked out the window and saw that the moon was still quite high above the horizon. Using the moon as a guide, he estimated the time to be around 4 in the morning. Being able to see so clearly in the dark was a novel experience, but it was overshadowed by the fact that he had been awakened almost 2 hours earlier than he had planned. The same voice yelled, "Oh stop, you're not even sleepy." The blonde Naruto's head snapped as though it were on a swivel, and he met the smirking red-haired woman standing in the doorway of his room wearing what appeared to be her typical outfit. The majority of kunoichi wore that simple tunic for comfort and versatility, but Kyuubi's body transformed the apparently functional ensemble into something a little more erotic. Kyuubi, who had 2 long, curvy legs and an almost scandalous amount of cleavage, grinned even more when she saw Naruto sway slightly as the blood poured from his head. Naruto retorted, "Yeah, but that doesn't mean I like to be waken up before I have to," being careful to wrap his heavy blanket around himself. The situation would have been much more embarrassing if he hadn't been under his futon, and Naruto was relieved that Kyuubi had decided to dress for once. Laziness isn't a becoming trait, and if you haven't noticed yet, your body has made quite a few changes. One of them being a lowered required amount of sleep to function properly. As of now, that time has been effectively cut in half, but once your changes are complete, you will probably be able to go a few days without sleep, and even then the time needed will be insignificant by normal human standards, Kyuubi explained as Naruto made his way to his changing room. To the amusement of Kyuubi, who merely observed with a sly smile as the boy attempted to conceal his more natural instincts, he was still holding his blanket tightly to his chest. "It's to be expected, I suppose. Naruto is too complex to be referred to as a child, but he is too young to be referred to as a man. His mind is far too developed to be referred to as such." As the boy emerged from his closet wearing a form-fitting black shirt and high orange pants, Kyuubi remarked to herself, "I'll need some time to pin this one down." Naruto looked down at himself and remarked, "I just put this on with the pants because the jacket would have looked ridiculous." His pants still need to be changed, or at the very least adjusted so that it wasn't so stuffy down there, even though they weren't nearly as tight as his shirt. Kyuubi said, "You look fine, Naruto, and if you put on your mother's cowl I doubt anyway will notice the difference," before Naruto put his father's gloves on his hands and draped the cloak over his shoulders. Naruto couldn't help but smile at the sentiment as his body felt the impression left by the gloves' previous owner, causing him to experience the same tingling sensation. After finishing his daily hygiene routine, which took only a few minutes thanks to some chakra control techniques taught in the academy, Naruto asked, "So why are we up so early?" He left feeling as clean as if he had just taken a shower. Kyuubi emphasized the last point as she gestured for Naruto to take his family scroll as well. "We need to get you adapted to your new body. Although you may have her motor skills back, there are many new things that you are capable of, and ignorance of these new features may get you hurt and even possibly killed," she said. Before leaving the room, the blonde silently complied. A little unnerved by the Anbu that followed them all the way to the edge of the forest lines, the two strode through the deserted streets at a faster pace. Neither of them knew whether he considered them to be unthreatening or outside his authority. Nevertheless, neither of them objected when Kyuubi led them farther into the woods than she had originally planned, because paranoia was a lesser of the deadly sins for someone in their line of work. Naruto asked eagerly, "So how do you plan for me to get acquainted with these changes?" He was similar to a child in a candy store. The candy store represented his body, and the more quickly he mastered it, the more treats he could get. Before being struck by a wave of Naruto's reluctance, Kyuubi explained, "Meditation, although true mastery of this art will take years, a simple understanding of the practice will get you fairly acquainted with your body while at the same time open up your mind to higher levels of thought, using the empathic link the two shared." Given the novelty of their relationship, neither could really determine whether the link was a boon or a bane. One advantage of owning it, though, was that it made it simple to determine how the other person was feeling at practically any moment. Naruto grinned and said, "Meditation was never my strong suit in the academy. I never had the attention span for it," out loud to Kyuubi. However, Naruto knew that the Kitsune Queen wouldn't be upset with him for his ignorance based on what little knowledge he had managed to gather about her. Instead, she would be upset with him because meditation was a fundamental ability that all warriors, whether they were human or Yuki, needed in order to be effective. But she would be irritated by the revelation, and an irritated Kyuubi was much harder to deal with. Keeping her irritation mostly under control, Kyuubi said, "Well, I suppose we'll have to start small and work up. This will set our schedule back a bit, but I'm fairly certain that no life-threatening situations will arise anytime soon." This was one of the most egregious cases of negligence she had ever witnessed. The village could lose a lot more lives if Naruto is left unprepared, because if he doesn't finish his mission, it could result in multiple deaths and, in the worst case, the village's destruction. Nonetheless, many people chose to ignore that fact and kept trying to hurt her human. "My pride as a kitsune demands that justice be done, so it will be." As she considered appropriate ways to retaliate against those who had wronged Naruto, Kyuubi made a silent vow. Kyuubi gestured for Naruto to join her as she started to explain the fundamentals of meditation to the boy, concluding that it was a task best left for later. To being meditation is one ability to objectively reflect on thoughts, all thoughts even, at one time. This is both a simple and complex exercise, as you are merely thinking, but at the same time you are thinking of everything on your mind. A daunting task at first, but as you practice it will become easier and easier until the point where you do it subconsciously at any given time, Kyuubi said while Naruto listened intently. Naruto closed his eyes and simply allowed his thoughts to wander, taking a moment to review the goal in his mind. Before Kyuubi called his attention, his mind was constantly shifting from one subject to another. After Kyuubi repeated, "Nice attempt, but you aren't capturing the essence of the exercise. Meditation is the ability to think without thinking, to review everything in your mind at once from an objection point of view." Naruto gave him a blank look. Naruto asked in genuine confusion, "To think without thinking? How is that possibly?" Before Kyuubi sighed. Naruto had a point, in his opinion. She was being far too evasive. But this was as straightforward as she could make it without omitting any important information. "How can I explain this without making any noises? I understand." The fox woman smirked at her brilliance after giving it some thought. Although it had taken him a moment to realize it, Naruto had been meditating the entire time. Kyuubi questioned, "Naruto, did you bring Uchiha Paradise with you?" and then smirked when the boy replied in the affirmative. "Now I want you to read the book for a few minutes while I check on something." Naruto said, "Okay, if you think it will help then I don't see how it could hurt," and then he opened the subversive book. At first, reading such smut in front of Kyuubi was awkward. Hell, reading Uchiha Paradise in front of any woman, especially one who might be able to read your mind if you weren't careful, would have been awkward. But over time, Naruto found his rhythm and soon found himself reading aloud to himself while Kyuubi listened in the background. Ruko harshly whispered to her male companion, "Ichi not here, we can't do that while we're in the Templia," as she felt a flush rise on her face. Ichi grinned and said, "Who gonna know Kami?" while his hands continued their minstrels. Naruto, the fox demon, began hesitantly. Naruto was on the right track, and the initial steps were essential to the meditation process. But the entire process would be lost if he became too aware of what he was doing. "Yes, Kyuubi?" Without taking his eyes off the paperback book he was holding, the boy with the blonde hair gave a mental response. He would have realized that Kyuubi's inquiry hadn't affected his focus at all if he hadn't been so preoccupied with his book. "You have learned one of the basic forms of meditation by talking to me and reading at the same time," the fox replied, causing Naruto's mind to wander a little. At best, it was a brief setback because Naruto soon got his bearings and resumed speaking to the kitsune Yomi, this time out loud. "What do you mean?" asked Naruto, puzzled that something as simple as reading and conversing simultaneously could be regarded as meditation. "You may not be aware of it, but you divided your attention between two things when you spoke to me. The first step to true meditation is to divide your mind into equal parts so that you can actively review everything that might be going on in your mind. By doing that, you understood me in your book." Kyuubi told a wide-eyed Naruto, "You are still years away from mastering this technique, but now that you have a sense of what you need to do, moving on to the next step should be easier." Even Iruka-sensei, who was always there to support him when he failed, could never truly say Naruto picked anything up without a significant amount of hard work and dedication. But now that he had tried something once and been told he had a firm grasp on the technique, he had never in his 13 years of life grasped anything so quickly and received any kind of praise from his teachers for doing so. He was more motivated than ever to perform better. "Now that I have this resolved, what are you planning to do next?" He had at least 2.5 hours to learn something new, according to Naruto's senses, so he asked with a smile of excitement. "We're going to start by helping you get used to your new boy. Before you go on active duty, you should at least be aware of the many new things you can do so that they won't distract you if you use them by accident. As you get used to your new senses, we have a whole family scroll to explore if time allows," Kyuubi explained. In all honesty, she had intended to spread out the meditation, sense, and family training over a long period of time so that Naruto could adjust to the changes at a somewhat natural pace, but based on the hand seals the blonde was developing, Kyuubi could tell he had other plans. Kage Bunshin. If time permits, how is this going? With a smug smile on his face, Naruto questioned, as a horde of clones crowded the many branches surrounding him. What are you trying to say? In response, Kyuubi questioned how making so many copies of the original could expedite the procedure she had in mind, and less. You seem to have figured it out much more quickly than I did. Actually, I had no way of consciously connecting with the memories of my past clones until you opened my eyes to meditation. But now that I have, even though I know I haven't, it feels like I've lived out those clones' lives, which is how I got the idea. Why not use my clones' memories for training if I can recall them perfectly well in combat? It will feel like you've practiced a training technique tens, hundreds, or even thousands of times at once. At least that's how I hope it works out, Naruto said, much to Kyuubi's amazement. For such a technique to exist, why the lifespan of a human is inconsequential if they can multiple their learning by such huge margins. No, if it were that easy, the world's balance would have been completely shifted by now, considering the age of this technique. Naruto may have stumbled upon something great, but nothing that hasn't been discovered before, especially given that the keys to such a finding are only this technique and meditation. No, this finding is only so grand for Naruto, because he is the only one able to support it on such a large scale. It is in its quantity that this method is so valuable, not its quality, and quantity is something Naruto has in spades, Kyuubi concluded thoughtfully before turning to face the boy. Naruto was undoubtedly unique, and her placement in him seemed to be far less of a coincidence than she initially thought. They were meant to be together, just as Naruto was destined for this particular training method. With a smirk on her face, Kyuubi said, "At least it keeps things interesting," and she and Naruto started their training. Time passed in a distorted manner. On the one hand, Naruto trained his senses with the aid of 100 shadow clones for a little more than 10 days. During that time, he discovered some limitations in his technique. The first and most restrictive was that he could only learn as quickly as his mind could process the information it received. In other words, he didn't know any of it until he could actively review all of the information. Kyuubi assumed this was a jutsu failsafe so that he wouldn't be overwhelmed by the shock of having so many memories flowing into his consciousness if all of his clones were killed in battle, and Naruto was grateful for that. The second limit was based on that frailty, so to speak, as the clones could only transfer thought-based training. "I told you to take your experimentation slow," Kyuubi reprimanded the blonde who was walking next to her. It was amusing to watch Naruto rub his nose in annoyance, which only made his face's bright red color brighter, but she assumed it was only natural because Naruto liked to go too fast for his own good and his senses' sensitivity would act as good speed bumps for him to pace himself. How could I have known that the clones were merely a marker for my mind and that I would experience the associated pain when I attempted what they had done? With unusual clarity, Naruto asked, his newly discovered wordplay and intelligence serving as yet another reminder of how his life was completely transformed 2 nights prior. That's a good question, but you now know that clones can only transmit thoughts and feelings or, more precisely, the intangible. When it comes to the Kage Bunshin technique, things like pain and conditioning are beyond the realm of understanding, Kyuubi explained, much to Naruto's ire. 2 nights prior, such words would have been incomprehensible to him, but now they were almost like a reprimand, reminding him of things he had already concluded. I know that because if it weren't true, my nose wouldn't be burning. Unbeknownst to him, talking to an immortal demon had become second nature, and snarling back at her in frustration had become as natural as speaking to a lifelong friend. Oddly enough, this fit the 2 intertwined souls quite nicely. Thus leading me back to my first point, you should have taken it slow, Kyuubi added, leaving Naruto to get upset over her point. In the brief time they had known one another, arguing turned into a sport between the two, akin to a mental spar or a contest of insults and wit. Kyuubi typically prevailed, but Naruto wasn't one to lose easily. Anyway, Naruto responded, much to Kyuubi's amusement, just watch, I'll find a way around that stupid limitation even if it kills me, and when I do we'll see who has the last laugh. Given Naruto's stubbornness, he might be able to transfer the tangible pain and conditioner via intangible means, which would be a breakthrough for shinobi in general, especially since the blonde felt like sharing his secret whenever he figured out how to do it. As Kyuubi reminded him, I'm sure you will, but as it is we won't have time for that now as we have 5 minutes before our meeting with the Hokage. She used her enhanced senses to tell the time. Naruto hurried from his slow pace to a brisk walk as they made their way from the forest to the Hokage's office. The road there was much more annoying than the ride the day before because his senses had taken another upward turn, making small things like a change in the air or a villager's footsteps feel like sand on his skin and his mind ringing. As he took a few cleansing breaths, Naruto told himself, concentrate and suppress the senses just like Kyuubi taught you. His mind gradually detached itself further with each breath, and the boy's irritations gradually diminished in his mind, much like they had before his senses were heightened. His foxy companion silently applauded him for the feat, which required a significant amount of control to accomplish in a clear mind that could only be achieved through a meditative trance. As they entered the Hokage's tower, the fox pondered, I wonder how far he will progress just with the clones. It seems the clone training is working faster than either of us can see. Holding back a growl, Naruto felt a protective surge run through his veins when he noticed the lustful feel the men's auras had taken. The Anbu guards stationed in front of the Hokage's office did a very noticeable double take when they saw the voluminous form Kyuubi had taken. That is, until they noticed Naruto's ki. As the two guards pasted between them, Kyuubi grinning and Naruto frowning, they both thought, there's no way he could have gotten someone who looks that good, respectively. In an attempt to change the situation, Kyuubi said, come now Naruto, if they knew the real me like you do I doubt they would be so willing. On the inside, though, Kyuubi found Naruto's protective dare she say I to envy to be mostly funny, if not charming. It had been ages since someone treated her like she would jump on them at any moment or with a strict sense of respect that left no room for any other emotions. Naruto's attitude was refreshing. It not only made her feel young again, but it also made her feel at peace with herself for once. That calm was short-lived, though, as Kyuubi saw that multiple people were staring at her from inside the room. She cursed the limitations of her clone body and cursed her own negligence for letting so many people evade her detection. To her credit, though, each person in the room was an expert in their field, and even a Jonin could miss any one of them if they weren't paying attention. Not to mention that her lack of attention would not go unpunished, as one of the room's occupants overheard the last of her conversation. And who could you really be? A smooth voice said, and Kyuubi, who was watching the speaker critically, couldn't help but feel uneasy around the young person. She could not say that the teen had anything special about him, aside from his silver hair, but she had the impression that he had a secret edge. Kyuubi viewed the teen as she would a man with a hidden dagger, and she played off her suspicions as agitation from his question. Kyuubi shot back with a slight glare, it's impolite to ask such a question without first giving your own name. Yakushi Kabuto. Konohagakure's general and aspiring medic. And you are now that's over with that? Kyuubi became even more agitated when Kabuto asked with a sly grin. The boy had a silver tongue and knew how to use it, which made her want to rip it out even more. However, he asked her a question that she hadn't wanted to answer yet, which put her in a difficult situation. As she searched her mind for a name, Kyuubi thought unconsciously, can't go around being called Kyuubi all the time, knowing the havoc that would cause. That is Uzumaki Kasumi, who was in hiding until recently and survived the Uzumaki raise. However, the Hokage spared Kyuubi the trouble of having to lie by saying, now that she has reached adulthood, she will be commissioned in Konoha as a special genin under my direct jurisdiction. The Fox Queen simply nodded her head in agreement and said, I have to give it to him, that backstory is a lot more foolproof than anything I could have thought of on the spot, even though he using that name is a bit too nostalgic for my tastes. What, another Uzumaki? I wonder if this is our opportunity to repay Kushina Sensei for all of her assistance. A rather raucous Kunoichi whispered to a coworker. Naruto couldn't help but smile as he met the eyes of the renowned or notorious Amaterasu Anko, recognizing the distinctive brown duster and fishnet mesh that highlighted her figure. Ironically, Kushina Sensei's son becoming a shinobi coincides with another Uzumaki strolling straight into our village. In response, the seductive voice said, it's too convenient to be a coincidence, so I'd have to go with divine humor. Maybe Kami's finally giving us a break after years of heartache. The curly black hair and striking red eyes only served to highlight the beauty known as Kurenai in Naruto's imagination. It was as though he was under the Genjutsu mistress's spell, and like many others before him, Naruto had no problem with that. The blonde's face flushed as Anko teased, divine humor that's rich, but in a way you right, Naruto is his father's son, you can see it in the way he's looking at you. But considering his history of pulling practical jokes, he undoubtedly has some Kushina Sensei running through him because no one else would have the audacity to write graffiti on the Hokage's monument. She had a boyfriend who turned into her husband, but couldn't that be the case? The blush on Naruto's face changed to a warm glow of awe when Anko corrected him. Naruto muttered out loud, the way they speak of Tama they must actually know them, grabbing the attention of the woman who was talking. Yes Naruto-kun, We knew your mother. I, Anko, and one other were her genin students. Kushina. Sensei was in every sense our sensei. She taught us everything we needed to know about the shinobi world and more, but moreover she taught us about life and how to stand out as individual ourselves, Kushina said with a faint gleam in her pupils. As heartfelt as Kurenai's words, Anko added, yes, she taught us a lot, from how to dismember a man with a toothpick to how to heal such dismemberments with less chakra than a simple henge. Your mother was truth an angel in death's clothing. In a way she became a mother to all of us. Kurenai, I, and Shizune, and in payment for that we will try to do the same to you. All Naruto could think to say was, I'm glad. He didn't get speechless very often, but hearing someone talk so openly about a woman he had never met but had loved forever made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. And so are we, but before we can get into any more specifics, how about we let the Hokage finish assigning you your first mission, and from there we will spend time fulfilling what we promised, Kurenai said after a brief pause. Before focusing on the Hokage, the woman with the scarlet eyes added, he is their child, and if that means anything to the world, he will be as great, if not greater. After the Hokage began, Naruto looked around the room. Thank you Kurenai, and on a side note I am in no hurry, and as for you Naruto, you are here because there are a few people in this world that loved your parents much like I did and are willing to do anything to help them, he said. Naruto knew all of the residents personally, with the exception of Kabuto. With a sound of excitement in his voice, Naruto exclaimed, Tenchi-san and Iruka. Sensei, what are you two doing here? Naruto felt more at ease after meeting the kind giant and friendly teacher. He also had complete faith in Kurenai and Anko. Chan. Nevertheless, Naruto continued to question why they were all gathered in front of him. Well, to put it frankly, most of us owe either one or both of your parents a favor, so before that faithful night they assemble us, much like we are now, and made us promise that we would guide you in the best way we knew how. Had it been allowed, any one of us would have adopted you. However, because of Clan Leader Act, no clan leader, no matter the age, can be lawfully adopted into another family that isn't their own. A stupid rule that was lobbied into our village code during the formation of our village, but it is a law nonetheless. So those bound by your parents last will waited until you were old enough to realize your lineage, helpfully guiding you along the way, to approach you with our offer, Tenchi smiled. With each passing one, the hulking man's words made more sense, and Naruto smiled softly as he recalled his experiences at the weapons shop. As Anko and Kurenai had done in their own ways, the giant weaponsmith had always watched out for him. For the first time, Naruto had evidence that he wasn't alone, and the realization lifted a heavy weight from his chest. As for me, you changed my outlook on life. Naruto, if it hadn't been for you, I might have been well on my way to becoming another Orochimaru. The Sandaime may have taught me countless jutsu and techniques to quell my rage, but it was your indomitable drive and will that made me look at myself. I mean really look at myself and see what my anger was doing to me. Naruto, the Hokage may have saved my life, but you saved my soul, Iruka said with genuine emotion, eliciting a warm smile from his favorite blonde brother and a few approving glances from his peers. As Anko eyed the Chunin teacher, she thought, well on his way to being another Orochimaru. It just goes to show that even a nice guy like that can become a complete psycho bastard if pushed far enough. The meek type had never piqued her interest because she thought they were a little too subdued, but this academy teacher was quickly gaining interest. On the one hand, there was a calm schoolteacher who occasionally lost his temper, but on the other, like the opposite of a coin, there was the dangerous Black Dot Ops agent who had received 1-on-1 training in shinobi techniques from the Sandaime Hokage. She could find many similarities between him and her despised ex-sensei. But Iruka appeared to be able to reconcile his opposing worlds, in contrast to Orochimaru, who lost his parents and his position, and went insane. As she remembered the fiery redhead who rescued her from her depression, Anko thought wistfully, I guess that blonde brat is just as good as his mother in that respect. Anko returned her focus to Naruto and observed his conversation with the lone outlier during their brief reunion. I am sorry my father couldn't be here, but a medical emergency came up and I am here in his place. I may be for the best though as, like your mother, I learned all about the world of medical ninjutsu from him and I'm sure I will be able to pass his teachings down to you, Kabuto grinned. Despite his outward appearance of friendliness and likability, Kabuto gave Naruto and Anko a strange chill. It seemed like something was wrong with him, but considering their line of work and, in particular, their chosen field of expertise, it's likely that he witnessed something that changed his life forever. Unusual, but I've witnessed worse, Anko clarified as she considered her rebellious sensei and her suspicions vanished. Though it was extremely unlikely, This Kabuto might have been just as cynical as she was and was simply better at hiding it. Anko pushed her cynicism aside and turned her attention to Naruto as he walked to the middle of the room. He had something to say, judging by the expression on his face, and it was significant. "Thank you all, your support means more than you'll ever know to me. All of you knew my parents and because of that you saw it fit to help me without even the slightest hesitation. Hope I can make you, and them, proud, and for that cause I will work my hardest in whatever you have planned for me." Naruto was able to say. Following his conversation with Kabuto, he was able to get a glimpse of the personalities of each of these individuals through their friendship with his parents, and based on what he had heard, they were more than he could have ever dreamed. Iruka laughed and said, "Your enthusiasm never ceases to amaze me, Naruto-kun, but you don't know what you just signed yourself up for." Soon after, everyone else who wasn't Naruto started laughing aloud. Naruto said, "What do you mean, Iruka?" Sensei, grinning nervously. For good reason. Iruka only laughed like that when something bad was about to happen, and by bad, Naruto meant for him. His mind was raising warning flags. Anko responded for the Chunin, winking at the man just for good measure. "Let's just say with your current training regimen you won't even notice that a month will have gone by when you're done," she said. With increasing alarm, Naruto asked, "Training regime? Wait, why will this take a month? Haven't I become a genin and will be assigned to a team?" "Normal, yes. But seeing as you weren't supposed to actually graduate, you were placed on a team to help balance your lack of skill with Sasuke's exceptional skill. A technicality, I assure you, but a necessary one nonetheless, as this system has saved countless lives in the past. However, the reason for the month delay is Sasuke's current rehab status. It will take at least a month from him to recover from the mental damage Itachi has inflicted on him. So during that time you and your other teammate, Haruno Sakura, will be assigned to different graduate posts as Sasuke recovers," the Hokage explained, and much to his surprise Naruto didn't jump for joy when hearing the pink-haired girl's name. No, not even a glimmer of passion passed across the blonde's thoughtful eyes. After a long pause, Naruto finally said, "So during this time period I figure I'm going to be training with these guys, and what of Sakura, what will she be doing?" As before, his voice lacked the cherry-haired Kunoichi's typical passion and instead had a measured tone that seemed to be an attempt to gauge the situation. Sarutobi responded, encouraged that Naruto could also see the wider picture. "She will be covering as instructor's aide in Mizuki's stead, a job she is more than ready for, while at the same time she will be going over the many key points of her education once again to better prepare her for her upcoming trials as a genin," Sarutobi said. Ignorantly, Naruto said, "Good, so I'm guessing the sooner I start the better," before he was engulfed in more laughter. "Always straight to the point with you, Ododo, but I'll warn you, I'm not going to go easy on you because I see you as my little brother," Iruka said, looking directly into Naruto's eyes. The boy's sky blue pupils were the only things the man could see: a rock hard determination and unflinching confidence. Naruto responded, "I wouldn't want it any other way," and the two left for their first lesson. Naruto listed all of the practices he would be attending that day. "So I'll be training with you, and then going to the hospital to learn medicine, followed by genjutsu training with Kurenai, before seals tutoring with Anko, which is then followed by weapons training with Tenchi." To put it mildly, it was a very busy schedule, but he would need to follow in his parents' footsteps. As he considered all the fascinating things he would be learning over the coming weeks, Naruto added in his mind, "And to think there's still my training with Kasumi and my family scroll to go over." Iruka gave Naruto a nod after saying, "Yes, that's the main idea of your schedule, but it will be up to you to study up on all of these subjects during your own time as well as put forth all the effort needed to succeed." Iruka added, internally beaming with pride at the prospect of Naruto succeeding, "Although I don't doubt you can do it, Naruto, you are by far the most amazing person I know, and becoming a medical, genjutsu, and seals master to emulate your mother while investing time to become the ninjutsu and weapons master your father will only prove that fact to the rest of the world." It would be a long road, but he was confident Naruto would stick with it because of the blonde's mule-like stubbornness. Iruka finally discovered the ideal location to start training after making his way through Konoha's forest. The academy teacher recalled all the days he had spent here studying under the Sandaime as he gazed with nostalgia at the old practice field, and he imagined Naruto doing the same. Iruka pulled a piece of paper out of one of his many pockets and gave it to Naruto without wasting any more time because the memories made him more eager than ever to begin. Holding the rectangular piece of paper between his thumb and forefinger, Naruto questioned, "And what am I supposed to do with this?" He made an effort to control his agitation, but even the most patient people frequently became irritated when they were pulled into the middle of the forest for no apparent reason. He was receiving nothing at all from the piece of paper, and although he was far from an expert with his new senses, neither Naruto nor Kasumi, who was far more adept with them than he was, were able to detect anything with their enhanced perception. As Naruto followed instructions, Iruka retorted, "You're supposed to channel chakra through it to test your elemental affiliation, but that's just one of the things I'm testing you for." Because, in contrast to the shadow clone that Naruto's body had grown accustomed to producing, any other chakra manipulation aside from the few jutsu he had explicitly learned was like water gushing out of a fire hydrant. There was a noticeable surge of chakra once the boy's mental and physical energies merged. Even though the boy's dexterity was comparable to a butcher's, his chakra completed the task, and the effects were immediate once the blonde's energies saturated the paper. Naruto watched in wonder as his paper was torn into 3 pieces, starting from the upper corners and moving down to the center. Then the right end exploded with flames, and the left end became so wet that the paper itself broke apart. Ultimately, between the 2 ostentatious occurrences, the paper's center kept breaking until the fragments were smaller than the shocked blonde could handle. And as quickly as the paper came to life, the traces of its deeds vanished into the surrounding environment, as though the paper had been vanquished, burned, and forgotten by the world. Still in awe of the previous chakra show, Naruto questioned, "Wow, what does that mean, Iruka Sensei?" The second was a water user, the third was a fire user, and the fourth was a wind user. So it's understandable that they could replicate such a feat, but even then they could only do one. Nevertheless, you Naruto have a triple affinity, which is nearly unheard of outside of bloodline limits, and I have no doubt Kyuubi's meddling has something to do with Thesa, Iruka explained, omitting the final detail. The cutting of the paper represents a wind alignment, the burning half is a fire alignment, and the dampening is a water alignment. With mock innocence, Naruto said, "So I guess that means I'm pretty advanced for my age," which made Iruka laugh before the Chunin simply nodded in agreement. After being brought back to Earth, Naruto put on a little pout and focused on what Iruka had to say. However, that doesn't come without its disadvantages, Iruka added as Naruto leapt for joy. Iruka began, "The most glaring disadvantage is your lack of chakra control, which is understandable considering you have more chakra than either I or any of your sensei can match, possibly combine even, but to fully draw out the potential of any of your jutsu you will need to master your chakra," and then received an accepting nod from his pupil. Iruka sighed inwardly at the blonde's acceptance, since normally he would have to bargain with the boy for over 10 minutes before he could accomplish anything. Iruka remarked in silence, "It seems like Naruto's way of thinking has been totally changed, and I can't say it's not for the better," before Naruto looked him in the eye with interest. "What about the other drawbacks?" Naruto inquired with sincere interest. "The other disadvantage isn't really a disadvantage when weighed against the strengths you just acquired, but to put it simply, since you have such a strong affinity for each of your elements, it will be damn near impossible for you to seamlessly mold any other elemental aligned chakra without mixing it with your own alignments," Iruka explained as Naruto absorbed what he had just said. "He's even willing to look for his weaknesses now. It seems Naruto has changed more than I thought." Feeling a little depressed, Naruto questioned, "So I'm guess truly mastering earth and lightning jutsu are out of my grasp?" Not being able to master any of the lightning jutsu would be a blow, but he wasn't sure about earth jutsu. Thankfully, it wasn't as horrible as it initially appeared. "Yes and no, mastering them would take a considerable time for you to master even your strengths, even longer than most because of your control, but it's not impossible. However, it'd be wiser to work with what you have first before moving on to other things. That way you will have the control and knowledge necessary to perform those harder jutsu," Iruka amended, causing Naruto's face to lift. There was still hope that he could use lightning to zap Sasuke whenever he wanted. Wondering what water, fire, and air could combine to create, Naruto said, "Well, that's a relief. I have big things planned for those jutsu you know, but something you said earlier interested me. You said something about mixing alignments, so is it possible to mix me 3 elements into something greater?" Steam was the only thing that sprang to mind, which was depressing, but Naruto was certain that if the possibility existed at all, he would find something better. Like before, yes and no, mixing elements is usually something only people with bloodlines can accomplish, but there have been a few known cases where a person with dual mastery of 2 elements can blend them into something more. Take the Kazecage's Setetsu, Iron Sand. The Kazekage was a powerful wind user much like yourself, and through a certain mixture of elements only he knew, he was able to magnetize the air and dust around him into forming iron sand. His technique is still legendary ago the shinobi world, mainly for his lethality as well as its complexity, Iruka continued with a look of amazement in Naruto. Naruto said, "Well, I guess I have a lot to work for then, don't I?" And Iruka simply grinned. His unwavering determination was a constant source of inspiration for the boy. Iruka clarified, Yes, and to start we need to work on your chakra control. Before the Anbu level academy teacher planted a kunai atop a nearby tree with uncanny speed and accuracy. Iruka said, "Now I need you to retrieve that kunai," before Naruto eagerly started to climb the tree. Iruka said, "Oh, without using your hands," before Naruto collapsed onto his back and gave his sensei a questioning look. "Say what?" As Iruka watched his student attempt to run up the tree using only speed, he couldn't help but think, "Oh, we are going to have so much fun." Iruka shouted, "Okay, time," before he heard a chorus of about 100 moans. Naruto had finally grasped the concept of molding chakra on the bottom of his feet after a series of accidents and especially amusing falls. Naruto had a rather large lump on top of his head after being jettisoned off the surface of one tree and into another. Unfortunately for him, it appears that his chakra was now a bit more potent than usual in addition to his weak control. On the original, bruises had healed quickly, but because Naruto had decided to use his shadow clones at that time, all 99 of his doppelganger unknown currency ingers had a significant abrasion on the top of their heads. Naruto repeated, "You heard him guys, we'll continue this later," while the clones all poofed themselves to oblivion. Naruto was reassured by a brief burst of information that the memories were present and that all that remained was to sort them out. As he and his Otodo headed to Naruto's next training session, Iruka remarked, "You did surprisingly well. It takes most genin a solid 2 weeks to finish the exercise, but it seems you already have the basics down." Naruto responded, "If you say so, but I still think 5 steps isn't much. Fortunately, after I go through these memories, the actively should only get easier." As the hospital came into view, the Konoha Hospital appeared to be a rather intimidating building, especially since he had been training with Iruka for an hour and a half since 0730-1 that morning. Iruka said, "I agree, and I must commend you on that training method. A month may not be much time, but with shadow clones constantly multiplying that learning time, you may be able to get up to speed as fast as we hoped," before sliding the glass doors behind him open for the blonde. Iruka always made this choice because the medical center's art of medicine is powerful but highly refined, and the reinforced structure was made of seals that absorbed the natural chakra fluttering around, making the building as strong as steel but as convenient and elegant as glass. Naruto would soon discover this fact. Before Kasumi politely peered out from around the corner behind him, Kabuto said, "All right, on time. Naruto-kun, are you ready to begin your lesson?" For some strange reason, the disguised fox demon decided to go to the hospital after speaking with Iruka on the way to the forest. However, since they spent the entire morning discussing chakra and working on his control, it doesn't really matter. But now that the redhead girl would be attending his medical classes, Naruto could breathe a little more easily because, for some reason, Kabuto made him nervous. Naruto attempted to engage the silver-haired boy in conversation by asking, "Yes, and what have you and Kasumi been doing this whole time?" At the very least, Naruto sincerely hoped that getting to know him would help him get over the unsettling feeling he had from him. "Nothing other than accessing her current medic knowledge. Fortunately, she isn't too far ahead of you, so I won't be too boring to her or have to skip anything with you," Kabuto clarified as they moved through the hospital. Kabuto had to make his rounds while teaching, which Naruto found increasingly intriguing because Kabuto could heal a patient with just a flicker of chakra. Naruto could sense that he would eventually be able to trust the silver-haired boy, and it was difficult to feel uneasy around someone who could alleviate pain with such benediction. For the first time, Kabuto's voice carried a serious tone as he asked, "So Naruto-kun, now that you've gotten to see a little what the med.nin life is like, are you willing to undergo the training to do the same?" Naruto could see the underlying passion in the genin's eyes as they met behind their reflective lenses. His life was medicine, and he would need to be equally committed to it as Kabuto in order to be as kind and talented. "Yes, I am willing and ready, for if my mother found medicine to be an art worth learning, I can't say I don't feel the same way," Naruto replied with sincerity. He would be damned before he abandoned any of his parents' artistic endeavors, despite the fact that they left him a home and a lot of money. Kabuto smiled knowingly at the boy and continued, "Good, and hopefully in time you won't just be doing this for your mother or to help people, but you'll be doing it for yourself." When Naruto realized Kabuto had read him like a book, his shocked expression could only be covered by a smirk. As he started his lesson, Naruto thought, perhaps this guy isn't so strange after all. Kabuto reprimanded Naruto as his control continued to waver. Steady a consistency in your chakra flow is one of the many things you will need to master in order to be a good medic, Naruto," he said. Given that they had only completed half of lesson 1 after almost 2 hours of learning, Naruto simply gritted his teeth and concentrated. Naruto's chakra flickered once more as he muttered to himself, who would have pictured Kabuto as such a taskmaster? Naruto confirmed his focus after catching Kabuto's glare out of the corner of his eye, lest he have to endure the lecture again. This quality is necessary for a finely detailed craft like this one. Now concentrate, as Naruto directed even more of his medical chakra into dead fish. Kyuubi commanded, you may understand the fundamentals of meditation, but your skill level is not high enough for you to lose concentration on something that is this taxing. According to his understanding, having almost flawless chakra control is a prerequisite for becoming a med.nin. Although Naruto currently lacked this quality, his natural ability to create medical chakra meant that he didn't need the complete control required to balance the patient's and the medic's chakras. As the fish gradually started to exhibit signs of life, Naruto added, Kabuto even considered my med chakra a medical mystery, seeing as form medical chakra is like forming elementally aligned chakra. Given that it took medical professionals years to develop the control required to align their chakras with their patients, Naruto assumed he was cheating in some ways. However, he was only able to accomplish this because of an accident. He did not, however, possess the control needed to use the chakra just because he was able to naturally form it for healing. Kabuto said, that's enough Naruto, the fish is dead, while examining the lifeless creature. Too much time had gone by for the specimen's body to wait for assistance, even though the body could survive a little after consciousness was lost. Kabuto sighed, assuming that since it was the first day of training, he had overestimated his expectations. Before giving Naruto a shoulder pat, Kabuto reflected, but just the thought of having a student who could catch on so quickly this must be the feeling Dad was talking about when he reminisced about his days training Kushina-san. It's alright, you are far more advanced than you should be. There is still a lot of theory you must go over before you will be able to successfully do this, even with your medical chakra. However, I will say, watching you has assured me you hold much promise, because even with your chakra control you still tried your hardest to save even the most common of specimen. That sentiment will surely carry over to your actions when on the field, and is something any shinobi would want on their side, Kabuto said, bringing a grin to the disappointed expression. Actually, Naruto's lack of clinical knowledge and chakra control was the only thing preventing him from progressing. Even though he was able to automatically connect with his patient's chakra, repairing bones and tissue required spatial reconstruction, a skill that is typically acquired as the practitioner gains control. But in Naruto Chase, he had the final product but lacked the tools to use it, which was regrettably no better than lacking the control to properly align a patient's chakra. As the boy's other sensei worked on his control in their respective fields, the solution to that half of the issue would eventually be found. Regarding the other half of the issue, which also had a straightforward fix, Kabuto handed the 3 blonde books, which were extremely thick. I want you to start reading these books tonight. It may be a bit lengthy and thick in terminology, but I will be able to answer any questions you may have when we meet tomorrow, he said. Naruto could tell by looking at the covers that he would enjoy studying anatomy, biochemistry, and biology because they could all be directly related to his chosen field of work. However, the idea of having a lot of homework makes him a little anxious. Naruto jokingly remarked, I thought I got out of homework when I graduated, before summoning 3 clones to retrieve the books from him. Naruto was determined to make the most of the technique after learning about its unique advantages, even if it meant using his chakra essential to complete his homework. After the shock of witnessing Naruto summon solid clones subsided, Kabuto pondered, interesting way of getting around one of the strongest deterrents to medicine. I'm guessing the clones are able to transfer the information to you somehow. In response, Naruto said, yeah, but it takes some time for me to assimilate all of the memories, so in a sense I will be studying tonight when I meditate in order to better organize my mind for the information, to which Kabuto raised an eyebrow. As he resumed his shift, Kabuto waved goodbye. I see pragmatic as well creative, those are 2 traits that'll take you far in this world, Naruto. Be sure to hold on to them, so until tomorrow, he said. Naruto gave his face a final smile before turning around and heading out of the hospital. He's definitely not as strange as he seems at first. Did you ask your Vulpine tenant? As Naruto made his way to the next stop on his training schedule, the woman said, my thoughts exactly. Kurenai walked lightly in front of the several blondes who were captivated by her talk. Genjutsu, at its core, is using chakra to manipulate an opponent's brain, thus altering their perception of reality, she said. Kurenai managed to keep a slightly embarrassed smile from coming to her face after receiving a concession of affirmative nods from the group. A Jonin's dream was to have a group of genin listen to everything you said, and in a way, Naruto was realizing that dream by having his clones and himself listen to her lecture and take notes. Despite cheating a little, she felt that she was finally receiving the recognition she deserved in that regard. Kurenai went on, grinning even more at the amazed and cunningly thinking faces that sat in a semicircle around her. However, it is the various means in which you can change someone else's world that the true art known as genjutsu shines the brightest, she said. She loved it when they hung on to everything she said. One of the clones whispered to the real Naruto, "Sounds like this has some great pranking potential," which made the blonde leader smile with pleasure. That's when Naruto realized he couldn't remember why he had always disliked genjutsu. This material practically begged to be refined and molded into a masterwork of practical jokes. Kyuubi gave a little laugh when Naruto joked, and the battle potential it has, it's half bad either. It's an understatement of the day, but there is still a lot of truth in what you said. Naruto became even more eager to begin after Kyuubi retorted, "Illusions are far too powerful a tool not to be used, and given the natural aversion many creatures, both human and demon, have to the art, mastering it would make it even more of a valued weapon." Following Kurenai's statement, "Before I can teach you anything, I need to see how high is your current genjutsu skill level, and from there we can work on what to improve on." Naruto leapt to his feet, dismissing the other clones to other tasks and leaving Kyuubi, Kurenai, and himself alone. Naruto activated his first genjutsu and said, "Okay, this shouldn't take long because I only know 2 genjutsu." His face changed to the Hokages without any hand seals, complete with pipe, and the recognizable Sandame's ring of smoke appeared above his head after a few breath-outs. That's almost perfecta slash that it's perfect. In addition to perfectly mimicking the Sandame's features, he was also able to alter his breathing and scent to match the Hokages. "Hey, you must have studied that jutsu for a long time," Kurenai said, clearly impressed. He even managed to overcome the shadow problem that most people have with maintaining a shape that isn't their own, but for some reason Naruto had no trouble making his shadow look like the Sandame's. "Yes, it took me almost a month to understand this, along with the Bunshin and Kawarimi, but it all made much more sense after I read a passage from my family scroll. But to be honest, this is the first time I've attempted a henge the way the scroll instructs, and it obviously turned out just as well." With an exclamation that perfectly matched the Hokage's voice, Naruto attracted Kurenai's interested attention. Kurenai thought suspiciously, "There's only one way to do a henge, unless a," and then she reached out to touch the boy's head, expecting her hand to pass through the genjutsu and disturb the chakra matrix, ending the jutsu. However, when her hand touched what felt like solid flesh, Kurenai almost knocked Naruto over. "How? Nobody knew how to make Arl henge except the Nidame." Before realizing who exactly Naruto's great-grandfather was, Kurenai cried out, "Unless a," she confessed shamefully that she had forgotten that the fourth's grandfather was the second and that it was only natural for Naruto to know the ability. In fact, Lady Tsunade did, but that was understandable given the relationship between the Senju clan and Namikaze. Nevertheless, seeing your newest pupil perform what is considered the perfect disguise left Kurenai feeling both shocked and thrilled. "Kurenai, Sensei, is something amiss?" With concern, Naruto inquired. The blonde still harbored a slight affection for the woman, and witnessing such an act had unsettled him. Kurenai acknowledged, "No, Noah, nothing's wrong, it's just you are turning out to be a more surprising person than I initially thought," and then she laughed a little. Kurenai thought, the only thing crazier would be if Naruto somehow knew the Magen Jubaku Satsu, demonic illusion, tree-bind death, before asking Naruto to demonstrate his second genjutsu. To think that a newly minted genin would be able to master the Nidame's perfect henge in a day after only taking a month to perfect the original henge. Kurenai could only exclaim, "What the," before everything went dark. After hearing only Kokwangyo no Jutsu, bringer of darkness technique, 2. The genjutsu mistress looked frantically for any exit with her chakra and thanked Kami above for letting her know that Naruto was not an expert at the technique because he had left some openings for her to escape. As her senses returned, Kurenai gave Naruto a disbelieving, almost fearful, look. As Naruto hurried to her side, Kurenai thought, "What is this boy?" She took another breath and simply raised her hand, gesturing for the boy to stop. This incident demonstrated that he would need to harden his heart in order to become a genjutsu master, and she still had a ways to go before she could realize her full potential. "I'm fine, Naruto-kun. You just gave me a little start, but given that you haven't received any official training, your skill level is startlingly high for someone your age. How long have you been using this technique, may I ask?" The red-eyed woman inquired, knowing deep down what was about to happen. "Well, judging by your response, I did a pretty good job for my first time using the jutsu," unaware of the thoughts going through the kunoichi's mind, Naruto boasted. When Kurenai finished with Naruto, His genjutsu skills would be like a masterfully crafted dagger, hidden from view but still poised to strike. This boy is a prodigy. To perform to high-level techniques with little to no training, teaching him will be like tempering a precious metal. I will have to go about this with extreme skill and care if I am to do this perfectly. I guess it's like Asuma says. Life's only fun when you have a challenge, Kurenai thought and then composed herself. ARRG. What's so difficult? The Fundamental 5, as they are known, set the stage for all subsequent genjutsu involving the senses because they teach the user to manipulate and distort sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. When used individually, they can be used to conceal a truth or gain a crucial advantage over an enemy shinobi, but when combined, they form jutsu like the Kokwangyo no Jutsu. This is why Kurenai made Naruto master these 5 basic genjutsus first. This should be easy for the boy, given his skill in the advanced version of this jutsu. Could it be that because the Kokwangyo no Jutsu takes so much chakra that control isn't exactly necessary? No, that's not the case. It's more likely that Naruto can better utilize his chakra in larger quantities, and because he has so much, focusing such relatively small amounts is several times harder for him, the red-eyed woman analyzed with a critical eye. Although she gathered she was missing a few specifics, her deduction proved to be mostly correct as she watched Naruto overload another one of the Fundamental 5, cause the jutsu to collapse itself. Although more chakra normally meant more potency or wider area of effect, in Naruto's case he was putting too much chakra in too fast and thus not allowing it to flow naturally over the minds of those affected. In time, and with much practice, he probably could take such an aggressive approach to genjutsu, but he would have to first master the basics behind the craft. Kurenai sighed and realized that it was more her fault than his. Naruto had demonstrated unexpected skill in the genjutsu arts, but, like most people with great innate skill, he had not received enough education on the subject, which made it difficult, if not impossible, for him to make up for it when a genjutsu didn't fit his personal mold of the high chakra cost assortment. You can now stop, Naruto. I apologize for apparently missing a crucial training step in my hurry. Having said that, you have amazing potential for someone so young, and I am confident that, with your unique mindset, you can master genjutsu like no other. But first, with a lot of emotion in her voice, Kurenai explained, we will need to work on the basics, and in your case, this will probably be the hardest part for you. Kurenai vowed, I suppose this is what Kushina Sensei meant when she said she saw potential in Maya. Naruto, you are your mother's son, and I promise you both that I will ensure the rest of the world will see that as well. Before drawing a book from one of her seals, which were ingeniously disguised as clothes, Naruto summoned a clone to take the copy and return home for additional study, just like the last time, and his impressed sensei nodded in approval. It was clear that Naruto would be working hard to succeed, and seeing him made Kurenai even more eager to assist him, just as his mother had assisted her. Well, I suppose I can begin the next genjutsu lecture since you won't be reading as we make our way to your next training station. Are you going to take notes? Kurenai asked in a phony innocent manner, and as before, a number of clones were gathered around her, pen and pad in hand, ready to listen to anything she had to say. As they headed into town, the woman thought, a girl could get used to this. All right, I'll be the annoying jerk is speaking to someone besides Asuma and me. As Naruto and Kurenai got closer to their destination, a familiar voice made fun of them. Naruto could actually see the man's apartment complex from where he was standing, and it was the same apartment complex where Naruto's beloved academy teacher resided. Stop talking, Anko. In a way, it was cute to have a friend who knew her so well, since Kami knew she didn't have many, especially since Shizune left. Just because I don't go hitting on every hot guy the first meet when I'm drunk doesn't make me a insufferable snob, Kurenai shot back, frustrated that Anko could still make her feel that way after all this time. Anko responded, and I'm sure everyone calls you Konoha's Ice Queen, because of your dazzling personality, which made Kurenai growl in annoyance. Smirking, Anko realized that even after all these years, she could still annoy Kurenai at will. As Naruto glanced confusedly between the two women, Anko added somewhat regretfully, now all that's missing is Shizune playing Peacemaker. Kurenai mockingly retorted, I may be known as the Ice Queen, but if I recall you earned more than a few nicknames for yourself back in the day, which made Anko flush. One of the things that made verbally sparring with Kurenai so enjoyable was that she always knew how to make a good comeback. Whatever Kuhi. Chan, Queen. Chan. Let me get the Brad before we burn up all the daylight, Anko said as she composed herself. Looking from the cocky Kurenai to the bewildered Naruto, Anko realized the difficult task that lay ahead of her. Sealing was no easy subject. Mastery of the art could only be attained through incredible amounts of time and meticulous practice, and the pressure of teaching her sensei's son certainly made Anko worry about being good enough. Kushina. Sensei, please help me through Thesa, Anko prayed, pleading with her teacher for patience and strength. She also threatened to go boa constrictor on the child's ass if he asked one more question while she was thinking. Will you stop talking? Yes, I am aware that Iruka resides here, and no, I will not attempt to molest you once more. We will start training. All of the blondes. Rapid fire questions were met with agitated responses from Anko. After Naruto closed his trap, Anko thought, geez, you play a joke on someone one time and they forever brand you as a pervert and pedophile. However, the silence would not last long, as Anko began speaking, Naruto called forth a group of clones to take notes and serve as extra ears for the lecture in case he missed anything. While Anko was somewhat impressed by the boy's forethought, he was more shocked by the comparison Naruto had just made between himself and his mother. As she continued her lecture, Anko reflected, this Kita he's Kushina. Sensei's son, okay. Because who else would summon clones to help them with their work like her? She was the first to use shadow clone training in over 3 generations, and it's only fitting her son be the one to take it to this generation. Anko ordered, now tell me what you know about seals and I will fill in the gaps from there, as all of the clones turned and gazed at their leader with wide eyes. Anko was briefly perplexed as to why there was no more commotion, but as soon as Naruto began to shuffle his feet, it became clear to him that the blonde knew very little about seals. As Naruto grew weary of her stern gaze, Anko reasoned, perfect, I guess it's not all bad, as I don't have to get him to forget all that nonsense he may have heard about seals as of yet. Alright, kid, pay attention, this is crucial. Seals are a combination of medical ninjutsu and genjutsu, and this is really watered down, mind you, Anko clarified before Naruto gave her a weird look. I know it sounds strange, and when your mother told me, I had the same thought, but after she gave me the explanation, everything made sense, so here it is. In essence, seals represent how chakra affects everyone and everything. Since medical ninjutsu and genjutsu are the effects of chakras on the mind and body, respectively, you can understand how seals affect the body. She acknowledged that it was fascinating to watch the clones work, but she also questioned how well they would comprehend the next section. But that explanation only covers seals that affect humans, because on the flip side you have seals that don't necessarily bother humans, such as summoning seals, Anko said, pausing to allow the note taking clones to catch up. These seals are essentially the opposite, as they represent the influence of chakra on its surroundings, which sounds a lot like ninjutsu, doesn't it? That's true in a way, but the primary distinction is that these seal variations are prepackaged and have a significant advantage over ninjutsu. This explains why, despite the fact that very few people can truly create them, battle seals, as many refer to them, are so popular. Because, when you think about it, an exploding tag will go off long before most ninja can finish a fire jutsu of equal power. So in essence you are getting a quicker bang for less than half the buck, Anko explained, and to her surprise, the clones stayed with her the entire time. They also save chakra, which is a valuable resource in combat situations. As Naruto completed taking notes, Anko remarked inaudibly, wow, this kid might be able to master this on top of everything else he has. Naruto added, so I guess that's why my mother studied medicine as well as genjutsu. To get a better understanding on seals and how they functioned, as he figured out his mother's identity. Your mother told me that she was viewed as a failure by her family for the majority of her childhood, but you don't know the half of it, kid. The fact that she was able to draw conclusions in both areas of sealing through her research because the two types of seals had opposite qualities to one another astounds me greatly, but we'll talk about that later. Returning to your mother, based on what she told me, her family believed she was not deserving of being a clan heiress since she did not naturally grasp seals and had to study 2 inferior subjects, just to understand. The rest of the details are unknown to me, but based on what was implied, she stated that she was sent to Konoha to be of some use to her clan due to her lack of skill. Anko spat, genuinely pleased when she sensed Naruto's rage. Naruto, regretfully relieved that all of his Uzumaki relatives were dead and buried, vowed to himself, to think I had family that was such skooma I will never forgive them, not a single one of them. He and Kyuubi were the only Uzumaki left alive, and if he had his way, it would stay that way. Enough about that, though. Once you begin studying your family scroll, I'm sure your mother will go into more detail to explain everything. But for your first lesson, I think we'll start with battle seals and work our way back to body seals, since they're generally easier to make and more exciting to use, Anko said with renewed energy. Kuhi. Shan had always told her that it was therapeutic to have someone with whom to vent her anger, and having Naruto there to mimic both her excitement about what's coming and her anger over their shared loved one was undoubtedly that. As she grabbed paper and ink and started their lesson, the woman pondered, I wonder if this kid will be good with explosives. PFT. What happened? Did I put enough chakra into the seal? It just sizzled and stopped. Naruto questioned Anko, who was examining the tag critically from below. No, it's not that. I think you put too mu, she said, but that was all she could do before the tag went off, causing a hole in the ground behind her apartment building and, to top it off, bringing down a tree. Nervously, Naruto said, I think it's time for me to get to my next station, and then, as the landlord's yells became more audible, he started to move around the building. Now let's go, kid, you read my mind. In just 2 hours, the blonde and brunette became friends, more like company conspirators with similar minds, but friends nonetheless, the careless teacher yelled as she passed the blonde in her frantic run to Higarashi's house. In Anko, Naruto saw glimpses of his mother and the things she treasured, and in Naruto, Anko saw visages of the person Kushina was and the things believed. Ironically, they both saw Kushina as a mother, one by birth and the other by surrogate, but neither was intelligent enough to recognize that they treated each other like siblings. It's unbelievable what you did. Since Naruto's parting present at the Uchiha's explosive tag regulations have been tightened, and if this is linked to her, well, let's hope Anko stays sober for a long time. Have I taught you anything? Anko said harshly in a whisper as she ducked under an Anbu patrol. Actually, no, didn't you say, quote, the more chakra the better? As they made their way to the Higurashi residence, Naruto shot back, some advice a teacher should be giving a first-time student. I swear Iruka was never this irresponsible. Naruto waved away from Anko's attempt to strangle him, thanking Kyuubi for choosing to develop the automatic defense instinct, since otherwise he would be out of breath at this very moment. Yes, what are you aware of? As with Kurenai, Anko had found all the right buttons to push with the blonde boy. Naruto was competitive, so insulting his skills was like a big red button for Anko to go buzzer. Happy on, however, the boy was extremely protective of those he cared for, so insulting one of them was a guaranteed outburst. That academy teacher's probably way too timid to even try something like this, let alone show he was responsible enough to guide an idiot like you, Anko shot back. Naruto shouted, and in 3, 2, Oniya take it back, Anko, in full fulfillment of the woman's prophecy. The boy's seriousness was indicated by the lost honorific, but Anko found the game even more enjoyable as a result. They were making a scene for everyone in Konoha by running through the streets after some more prodding. Anko danced just out of Naruto's reach, taunting him, hell kid, you may need to master seals because with that speed the only way you're gonna catch anyone is with a snaring seal. Until Anko collided with the man, neither of them saw the Anbu fall from the roof as they became increasingly irritated and obsessed, respectively. The woman's body responded instantly, drawing a kunai and aiming it at the man's heart. However, the kunai veered off course as soon as she realized who she was pretending to be. She jumped back and looked into the masked man's eyes, annoyed that she would be taken by surprise so easily. He's better than most, whoever he is. To ambush Naruto and me, and to do so in the middle of the day. The woman thought, I'd better be careful, this one might actually be a challenge for me, before assuming a defensive position when the man's hand approached his face. Relieved that Naruto had not been caught in the accident, the newly revealed Iruka grinned and said, I was called in to check a domestic disturbance, and given it's been a few days I figured I'd check and see if you were playing any jokes first Ototo, and I was right, you were running wild in the streets as usual. That was not to say, however, that the blonde was entirely innocent, and Iruka could tell his younger brother was concealing something with a single withering glare. Iruka looked down at the boy and asked in jest, so care to explain why you were running in the streets, or do I have to check for eyewitnesses before you confess? The only proof he needed was Naruto's drooping shoulders, but he wasn't only dealing with Naruto. Anko questioned, hey teacher. Anbu, where do you get off accusing me and my pupil of causing explosions? But saw her blunder when Iruka only arched an eyebrow. As Anko's mind started to spin, Iruka formally asked, why is that an admission of guilt Midarashi-san? Since she was dealing with a man, and men all have one weakness, she would have to use her secret weapon if she couldn't use guilt to get out of this situation. As she got closer to the scarred Chunin, Anko said, Iruka-kun, isn't there any way you could let us off with a warning? The Chunin managed to maintain his position despite her husky, lust-filled voice and her apparent cleavage from Iruka's position. As he regrouped, the Chunin managed to say, I could think about it, but you'd owe me one, while maintaining eye contact with Anko and avoiding her obvious assets. Anko retreated, more than a little impressed by the man's control, and said, "He's good, I'll give him that." As she and Naruto passed the Chunin, Anko said, "Well, that's settled then. I owe you one, and with that we'll be on our way." Iruka said, "I'll hold you to that, Anko," and then vanished in a smoke and leaf whirl. When the Higurashi house appeared, Anko thought, wouldn't have it any other way. Tenchi said excitedly, "Good to see you again, Naruto-kun, and for once I can actually say that free of any guilt," holding the boy's gaze. Naruto had gotten a sense of Tenchi's character from working under him for 6 years. He was a good-hearted, loving man who focused only on his career and daughter. Based on the few clues he had received from Tenten, Naruto surmised that his current behavior was related to the death of his wife. "I know if you could tell me then you would, Tenchi-san. I'm just glad you accepted me in your home all of these years, so I know how that must have affected your business," Naruto said glumly, recalling the looks he'd received from customers who had hurried out as soon as they saw him. Tenchi shocked Naruto out of his funk by saying, "Nonsense. If they could look past their own pain to see what you are, a proud young man with an unspeakable burden, then they don't deserve to use any of my weapons, then." The big man was, in a sense, well suited to such circumstances. For those who knew him, spending a few minutes with him would make their day because he was the definition of cheerfulness. After his apprenticeship at the shop, Naruto always had a fondness for weapons, so the mere thought of studying under the man excited him. Tenchi's words, "So with that out of the way, I'm guessing that you're ready to begin. However, before you do I will explain this once," were interrupted to make sure Naruto realized how serious the situation was. "The way of the weapon you will be learning, your father's way of the weapon, is one that does not shy away from bloodshed. If apprenticed under this style, you will temper your mind and body to be like that of an honed blade. Once unfurled, your enemies will know no mercy, and your judgment will be as cold and decisive as that sharp end of your weapon. So I will ask you this before we begin. Can you willingly accept this training, knowing that its sole purpose is for ending the life of others?" Tenchi asked, and for the first time his characteristic, chirpy, vanished. "I don't know, my philosophy has never been to kill. However, if it is to protect Konoha and all that I, and my parents before me, hold precious, then I will willing give anything to ensure that truth," Naruto passionately said. Tenchi's smile returned, and he thought, spoken like a true Hokage, that's Minato's boy all right. Tenchi was encouraged that Naruto would only use his blade for protection and not for destruction. Tenchi greeted Naruto with excitement as he led him to the back and into the dojo. "Good answer, one that will surely be tested by the world, however. Anyway, enough of that seriousness, let's move on to the fun part of your time here, training," he said. The dojo, which occupied half of the house's first floor, was furnished with countless weapons hanging from the walls and immaculate hardwood floors. The weapons on the wall, which ranged from katana to naginata, were all skillfully made and, for one reason or another, removed from the front of the store. Naruto's gaze continued to roam the walls before settling on the ninjutsu 3 he had first seen at the store. Scabbarded in a lacquered black sheath, the blade lay on the wall. Naruto could see his reflection in the ninjutsu's sheath's glossy finish. Tenchi's hand touched Naruto's shoulder as the two men gazed at the revered weapon together, and Naruto noticed that the blade was sitting alone on the highest level of the house. "Naruto, do you know each weapon in here has its own story, all of which belong to a dear friend who carried them into their respective final battles. As the crafter of each of these battles, I couldn't be more proud by the fact my friends would trust their lives to my craft, and with each of their deaths I honor that trust by placing them here. Naruto, this dojo is my own personally nirvana, a place where I can reach my enlightenment and see the memories of those passed through the things they carried in life." Tenchi's solemn words resonated with Naruto. The blonde silently scanned the room with reverence, attempting to take in some of the truth Tenchi discovered there. Naruto's gaze fell on the ninjutsu once more. "It's funny, however, that you would pick that blade over all the others in here. I guess it's only fitting, as the one blade I failed to make on time would be so heavily tied to you, and given your unpredictable reputation, it's even more so fitting that you'd pick up on that tie instantly," Tenchi said aloud as Naruto gazed at him with a confused expression. With his gaze fixed on his own reflection, Tenchi said, "Sorry boy, just an old man babbling about the pasta. Naruto, what do you know of that sword?" In an attempt to make sense of the situation, Naruto responded, "Tenten said it was made for a dear friend of yours, and given what you just told me, that friend died before you could complete it for them. Yes, that sword was made with the sole intent of saving Konoha from Kyuubi by harnessing the powers of the Shinigami. An arrogant goal for a mortal to have, but nonetheless I chased it with all of my being. However, that wasn't enough, and because of my failure the Yondaime gave his life to save our village, and since then this blade has been resting here in my home. As a constant reminder of my personal failure and savior, it's times like this where looking at my creation is both heartwarming and painstaking, as on one hand it is a surviving testament to my most noblest of friends, and on the other its living visage of a world where he may have lived, Tenchi told Naruto. From the back of the room, Kyuubi reflected, to think that a human could make such a blade to harness the power of death is a power no single being should control, but at the same time if it were possible so much heartache could have been avoided. She'd been more than welcome to participate in all of Naruto's practices, but standing off to the side had made her realize something. Everything else was something she'd already thoroughly studied over many millennia, with the exception of seals, which was the only subject that caught her attention. Before her mind started to fumble with the available options and the other details of her new life, Kyuubi thought, there's probably something else I could do to pass the time while I wait for the seals lessons. Tenchi had removed the revered from his post so Naruto could have a better look at the blade while he finished his explanation, out of the demoness's mind. Tenchi said, this is the blade in which you will be learning Ryusuiken, 4. The style your great-grandfather perfected, and the style your father used during his days as a shinobi. As a passionate ring entered his voice, Tenchi beckoned Naruto to approach while holding the sword as though it were sheathed on his hip and gripping the blade's handle in reverse. Tenchi let his ki flare for the first time in Naruto's presence and challenged him, saying, come see if you can best the river that's flown since the dawn of our village. It was just as crushing as the Inu Anbus had been years before. Even he had to acknowledge that it still required conscious effort to keep his sanity, but unlike that young Naruto who had been knocked out by the blast, this Naruto was able to stay upright. This is Tenchi. This is how intimidating the man who wouldn't harm a fly and laughs at everything can be. Is his aura truly this oppressive? Before forming his favorite jutsu with his hands, Naruto asked himself this question. His scared outburst of chakra created over a dozen shadow clones, and after the smoke cleared, they all surrounded the static man. Charge! Naruto yelled as all of the clones, each far more capable of fighting and more powerful than the Naruto of 2 days earlier, suddenly launched themselves. Regretfully, Naruto's newly acquired abilities were sufficient. In fact, they had no role in his blitzkrieg, as all of his clones were instantly destroyed. The only indication that Tenchi had moved was a slight flutter of his robes, but Naruto's gaze followed the motionless sheathed sword up to his standing form. How were you able to move so fast? Naruto inquired after attempting to decipher the clone's memories for the answer. He had only received a fragmented collection of pictures thus far, each depicting the death of a single clone. Since each image showed Tenchi using the ninjutsu to deal a clone some kind of critical damage, they weren't confusing when viewed separately. No, the confusing part was when Naruto attempted to figure out how Tenchi could be using one hand to wield the sword in one picture and the other in the next without even losing any of her skill. Tenchi jokingly said, there are many answers, most of which centered around years of training, but from the shocked look on your face you, or your clones, must have caught something unorthodox about the way I wielded this blade, right? But Naruto, who was still in awe, gave him a dull nod. Well, the secret lies in the mastery of Ryusuiken, because like a flowing river the blade must flow with the body as if it were part of it. By mastering that the sword will become a part of you, and you a part of it. This is something that transcends mastering kata or special techniques. This is your blade becoming a reflection of you and interchangeable with any part of your body. This is why I can handle the blade with both my arms, without the slightest difference in skill. And to master this style you will have to do that same, Tenchi said before assisting Naruto with one hand. When the giant of a man offered Tenchi the scabbarded blade, Naruto stood up and looked up at him in surprise. Naruto began, I can't accept this, I'm not ready. But Tenchi halted him with a stern expression. Nonsense. This was made for your father, and since he isn't here to claim it then it should be rightfully yours as his son. I have no right to it, you do, and that's that, Tenchi said with a stubborn smile. Naruto sighed and took the ninjutsu with a hand that was trembling a little because he knew he wouldn't win this fight. Naruto looked closely at the sheath and saw patterns of flowing fire etched into the lacquered finish. He immediately recognized the pattern as the same one that had been on the back of his father's cloak. Tenchi gave Naruto a strange look as he proudly tied the ninjutsu from his back, demonstrating his strong bond with his father. Naruto noticed the expression and asked, what, before checking his person for any strangeness. Tenchi laughed and said, nothing, it just seems we'll have to hold off training for a moment to make sure you are outfitted with some proper clothing, while Naruto made a face. Fall. Naruto groaned, you can't be serious. When Tenchi called his daughter, he made sure Naruto saw the sly gleam in his eye as he yelled, deadly. Tenten, get your things dear, we're going shopping. It was well known that Tenten was different from the majority of other girls. Although many of them preferred talking about boys to sharpening their kunai and treating their bodies after exhausting training days, Tenten shared one trait with the female masses: shopping. Naruto cried out in terror, "Please Tenchi, sensei, you can't do this to me." Once before, he had erred by going shopping with Tenten, and he had regretted it ever since. The 8-year-old blonde was left gasping for air and clutching his feet in pain after what began as a straightforward task to go buy some more material turned into a 4-hour shopping marathon. Naruto's curiosity was not nearly strong enough to willingly relive that experience, but he still doesn't understand how Tenten did it all without appearing even slightly worn out. "I'm sorry Naruto, it's for the greater good. Besides, what type of friend would I be if I let my comrade's son go into battle in nothing more than a tight-fitting shirt and grossly undersized pants?" Tenchi murmured. Naruto frantically shot back, "A good one who knows the dangers of shopping with your daughter," but Tenten was already downstairs and prepared to leave before he could say anything more. Tenchi exclaimed, "Have a good time you two," before Naruto gave her a crazy look. "He's leaving me." Tenchi prayed as Naruto was dragged out the front door, leaving Tenchi to continue working. "I'm sorry, Naruto. May Kami bless you because you will need it." Tenchi asked out loud, "Now to step this up while they're away. I wonder if we still have the blunt kunai?" Before dismissing the idea because, whether Naruto used blunt kunai or not, he would still be in pain at the end of the day. "I hate you," Naruto muttered feebly as he stumbled into the dojo, exhausted from shopping. Although he could have continued doing that for days on end physically, another second would have permanently damaged his mind. Tenchi joked, "Come now, Naruto, hate is such a strong word," as he watched him fall to the dojo floor. Naruto could see why Tenchi found this place so peaceful from his vantage point. The sharp metal smell contrasted well with the pine scent, and the hall's neutral decor of tans and beige let the mind wander without any implied feelings from the colors. As Naruto continued to let his stress melt away, he thought in private, "Now it just needs a zen garden like back home and it'd be perfect." Naruto yelled at the man who was snickering, "Well, I hate you for abandoning to that fataya 4 hours, 14 stores, 400 outfits. You have any idea how tortuous that is? Welcome to my world, and I'll have you know her mother was at least twice as bad, but if there's any silver lining to this situation then let it be this one. Now you can go out into the shinobi world with your favorite color and not look like a complete moron," Tenchi said in response to Naruto's fury. If he believes that anyone could be worse than Tenten, he is insane. However, as Naruto examined himself once more, he thought, "I must admit, this outfit does look pretty good." Naruto, dressed in black and orange, remembered the hour he and Tenten had spent debating whether it would be better to wear all black or all orange in the field. The owner of the store threatened to have the two leave unless they made a compromise because the argument went on for so long. Naruto was consequently dressed in a black jacket featuring 2 orange panels on the front and back of the torso, as well as black leggings with matching panels on the sides. The proprietor of the store remarked on how much Naruto reminded him of the native tigers of the leaf in the Forest of Death because of how well the colors contrasted. That remark inspired Naruto to replace his old orange jumpsuit with the same ensemble throughout his entire wardrobe, giving the boy a much more refined appearance. To Tenchi's amusement, Naruto pleaded, "Silver lining or not, can we get on with the training? I need to forget all that shop as fast as I can." Tenchi cautioned, "All right kid, but remember you asked for this," before giving Naruto the order to stand in the middle of the dojo. "Okay Naruto, this is the first exercise of the Ryusuiken. All you have to do is deflect the kunai around you with your sword," Tenchi said. Before the first kunai was launched, Naruto simply nodded, calculating how simple this exercise would be with his 6th sense. Naruto was first alerted to the weapon's position by the whistling of steel piercing the air, but unlike the shuriken Konohamaru had thrown, this one had not been launched by human hands. As a result, there was no ki behind the blow, and without ki, Naruto had no automatic defense. The boy screamed in frustration, "OWW, what the hell?" before innumerable blunted blades flew at him from the dojo's walls. When Naruto tried to draw his blade, he discovered that it was stuck in its sheath. Angry, he simply held the scabbard sword like a Bakken and assumed a defensive position. "What's wrong with me, Kyuubi? Why is my body not responding?" Naruto inquired as he started to get hit from all sides. "I should have anticipated this. Naruto's defense mechanism solely relies on ki's perception. It is your responsibility to protect yourself from approaching attacks in the absence of that crucial component," Kyuubi said, causing Naruto to start swinging at the approaching blades. Naruto hit much less than he missed, which only made him more frustrated, but his efforts were very beneficial. "That will be of great assistance. Why didn't you simply direct my defense system to my senses so that I wouldn't have this issue? A kunai struck Naruto squarely in the back of the head, causing him to groan. And have you ever reacted as though it were a life-threatening situation to every unexpected sound or moment? Kyuubi rebuked Naruto, making him reconsider her statement. That would be a far less productive system. As one, it would be far too inconvenient for practical use, and two, your own skills would rot if everything was done for you, she said. Naturally, he believed what the foxwoman had said, and he started to concentrate with newfound vigor. Focusing on all his senses required a broadened state of mind, similar to meditation, which was nearly impossible to actively use on a whim. Nevertheless, Naruto was able to exert some control over the circumstances, improving his awareness of his surroundings and fortifying himself. The change was evident to those who observed. As Naruto continued to dodge and deflect income projectiles, Tenchi thought, good, he's getting the first steps, it shouldn't be long before he can master them. The number of flying kunai gradually decreased, and Naruto deflected the final flying knife before he realized it. Naruto felt his right arm grow unhappy from the effort and sagged to his knees. That level of intensity was still difficult for him, even with his new body. Before placing a ring of metal around Naruto's feet, Tenchi remarked, good. Your movements are still beyond rough and your perception is still bad, not to mention you only used your sword in one arm. But all in all, good for a first try. Tenchi commanded, you are not to leave this circle, and the kunai were called back to their launchers. Naruto gritted his teeth and threw a heated glare at Tenchi, who pretended to be absent before the assault started again. Naruto remarked to himself, Kami, what a day, while enjoying a hot bowl of ramen at his preferred ramen stand. His body ached from all the stress he had experienced that day, but Naruto knew it was a good hurt because it would only make him stronger in the end. Looking at the redhead next to him, Naruto said, I can't wait for the tomorrow, right Kasumi? Although it was difficult to imagine Kyuubi by any other name, he would always need to keep up his appearance in public lest he start a riot in the middle of the village. Without raising her eyes from her bowl, Kyuubi said icily, yes, but I won't be joining you for Naruto's training. Despite being a sentient entity imprisoned in a proxy body, she would exhibit all of the typical symptoms of life, including hunger and exhaustion, if she were excluded for an extended period of time. Given that she had spent her entire life as a higher being than a demon, neither of which required as much food or sleep as humans, she found this trait positively annoying. Once more, Naruto staggered over the name of the demon and yelled, what do you mean Kya-air, Kasumi? The eating female clearly ignored his outburst and continued to do so until she finished her meal. Kyuubi put down her chopsticks and turned to face Naruto, making eye contact with the blonde who was clearly annoyed. Look, this is your training, something I will take little to no benefit in. Most of the subjects I am already extensively knowledgeable in or have no interest learning, so to better utilize my time I will be going over other things while you work, Kyuubi explains. Naruto's refutation lost all of its fervor after hearing Kyuubi's cool explanation, but the blonde was still intrigued by what she meant by other things. Kyuubi explained, instead I will focus on these Uzumaki seals, and from what I've read it will take me months if not years to fully comprehend all of them, a task that I will have to devoutly give my full attention to which Naruto gave him a startled look. Even though they had a clear level of trust, this was not the case for all of Konoha's residents, particularly the Hokage, who might have believed that Kyuubi was attempting to sever the bond between them if he learned that she was closely examining seals. Naruto said, I guess that's all right, but be careful with your research. For the two people speaking, it meant, don't do anything that may cause trouble, a sentiment that both parties respected, but to those around them, it sounded like a worried warning from a friend or loved one. Believe I will, and in the off time I've been looking through some of the techniques your father created and I have to say one really caught my eye, Kyuubi laughed. With genuine curiosity about what kind of technique could make a Nai.all knowing demon smile, Naruto asked, and what might that be? Kyuubi only needed to say, the legendary Hiraishin, to get Naruto's full attention. Pop thud. God damn it. For the blonde teenager trying to imitate his father's renowned method, the three noises were like an unceasing drum, a drum of failure and humiliation. Despite its apparent simplicity, it was a massive undertaking. It would be a huge understatement to say that the Hiraishin was like a supercharged Shunshin in theory. It was reasonable to assume that Naruto would have to master the Shunshin before attempting to learn the fabled Flying Thunder God, because the Hiraishin was better than the Shunshin in every aspect, surpassing the common technique in speed, subtlety, and even charka consumption. This, however, resulted in the drums situation as it exists today. Damn it Kami. Why can't I get this? Naruto exclaimed, a characteristic he had just acquired following the start of his Hiraishin training. Naruto muttered angrily, almost resenting that he had allowed Kyuubi to persuade him. The fox mistress, who was also fixated on Naruto's advancements in his father's method, described it as the best thing humanity had ever achieved short of fictionalized porn. Notwithstanding his literary interests, Naruto recalled the words Kyuubi said when she started describing the Hiraishin at the beginning of his training, which began a little more than 2 weeks ago. "This method is incredible. Your father, the fourth, was a real genius." Remembering Kyuubi's laudation of his father's work, Naruto reflected, he took the foundation for advanced summoning, a theoretical art that focuses more on traditional practices than on progressive advancements, and created something so innovative I doubt I could recreate if put in the same situation. Although his mother should have received more credit for tutoring the fourth in sealing, it became clear that this technique couldn't be simply taught once Kyuubi began to delve into its nuances. Further explaining the supercharged Shunshin theory, Kyuubi explained that summoning the Hiraishin allowed them to travel at a speed comparable to that of light by breaking down a living being into its most basic components. When it was activated, the user would be instantly taken to their destination because it was so fast that it could cross the barrier between planes. Nevertheless, Kyuubi clarified once more that there was more to the technique than that because, given the procedure required to move the user's body, the fourth had to solve the obvious issue of surviving after he dissected his body into its component parts. It goes without saying that before actual practice started, a lot of shadow clone testing was required. However, the blonde would need to learn the Shunshin, which was causing him a great deal of trouble, before Naruto could even start practicing the technique with shadow clones. As he created the hand seal once more, Naruto allowed the ram seal to do its job, forming chakra throughout his body and then releasing it where he wanted it. The only issue was that Naruto reached the release phase before everything went awry. Due to his poor chakra control, Naruto was hurled into a nearby tree after being launched like a cannon, complete with ninjutsu smoke. Pop thud. The blonde shouted again, "God damn it," and then got up. Kyuubi's training session was not going well. "So I see you're still having trouble with the Shunshin," Kyuubi said lightly, stating the obvious in a mockingly perceptive tone. Naruto gritted his teeth and bit back his remark, finding the demoness' arrogant idiosyncrasy irritating. Although verbally sparring with Kyuubi was frequently enjoyable, if not thrilling, Kyuubi consistently prevailed despite his larger vocabulary. To his sometimes furry friend, dismay, Naruto chose to keep quiet in an attempt to avoid another defeat. Kyuubi commented, "Not taking the bait today if fine be that way. I guess I'll just have to skip to the point of my whole interruption of your training, in an attempt to get Naruto to argue with him one last time." Kyuubi acted more like a pouting child than the timeless vixen she was because the blonde simply gave her a blank stare, obviously not playing into her game. The enthusiasm with which Kyuubi said, "You win, for now at least, but I promise by the time you get started on this you'll be back to your normal, outspoken self," was surprising given her background. After remembering the foxy lady's unusual demand to be called Q-chan, Naruto came to the conclusion that nothing could be expected from her. If Kyuubi hadn't been so serious when she told him or if he hadn't ignored her when he called her Kyuubi or anything else, Naruto honestly wouldn't have had any issues with it. But after a week, actually a saying it came naturally to him, particularly after he grew more used to Kyuubi's many peculiarities, like his incessant need to quarrel and cause chaos or his habit of reading porn. It makes sense why I was such a crazy kid. As he reflected on many of his past tricks, Naruto reasoned, with all that pent-up energy and mischief trapped in my body, it was bound to leak over into my personality. Which, to some, brought back memories of his mother's earlier antics, but he realized he was in a different league after hearing some of her tales through the scroll. Naruto only hoped that her disrespect for modesty and her overly playful nature wouldn't be leaking over anytime soon. Kyuubi, like him, attested to her foxy nature leaking over to him. Naruto caught himself thinking, but Kyuubi does have a nice rack, just before a burst of laughter flashed through his mind. As Kyuubi listened in on that final segment, Naruto mused to himself that he would not be hearing the end of this one anytime soon. Kyuubi jokingly said, "Physical appearances aside, I think I may have found a solution to your current chakra control predicament," before throwing the scroll at Naruto. The now common thrill of learning something new crept into Naruto's being after he realized it wasn't something he'd inherited from his many teachers. Naruto was thrilled to discover, as he tore into the scroll, that the technique he would be learning was one that his father had invented. Naruto started reading the first step to mastering his father's renowned technique with great enthusiasm. The Rasengan. Mom and Dad told me about this through their recordings in the scroll. They said Dad combined this technique with the Hiraishin to make the ultimate offensive combo, Naruto recited. Without averting his gaze from the scroll, Kyuubi said, "Here you're going to need these as well," and threw Naruto a pack of balloons, which the blonde container caught. Before heading to her favorite tree branch, Kyuubi grinned and remarked to herself that the boy was becoming more adept at observing his surroundings. Even though the shadow clone technique gave her a sense of freedom, she was a being created and supported entirely by Yuki, which made practically all human techniques inaccessible to her. This realization caused her smirk to turn solemn once she once again realized the limitations of her proxy body. Remembering the terrible backlash that accompanied the improper use of the technique, Kyuubi reasoned, "I doubt attempting the Rasengan would be of any use until I am able to find a way to maintain a more sturdy form, even though there is a chance I could learn the technique given that it is a control-based technique." As he came to his first obstacle in the technique, Kyuubi looked down at Naruto and saw that the boy was a long way from that point. Naruto gritted his teeth and grunted from the effort, directing the water inside the balloon to rotate more quickly while pumping more chakra into it. As some of his clones filled up the water balloons in a nearby stream, he had read over the first step of his father's technique multiple times while Kyuubi was thinking in private. Naruto started trying to replicate the legendary spiraling orb as soon as they got back, but it didn't take him long to realize how much he would have to do to his hamstrings. Naruto grumbled, "Arga my control, I need more control," as he watched the water turn so quickly. The revolving chakra was causing the liquid-filled balloon to bulge strangely, but not enough to cause the thin rubber to break. After he stopped swishing the water in the balloon, Naruto realized belatedly that the feat would require some ingenuity. He then performed a quick diagnostic jutsu on his throbbing arm. "Great chakra burns. I guess that means Kage Bunshin training is out for the moment," Naruto thought reluctantly, blaming his lack of self-control for forcing him to do this the normal way. Naruto admitted that he was growing far too dependent on his shadow clones to advance his training, but after seeing how much he had lost due to the Academy's carelessness and how much more there was to learn, the misuse of a single, basic technique seemed to have little long-term impact. Years would pass before Naruto understood the advantages of doing tasks by hand, as he liked to refer to them, as opposed to going over a clone's memory. When the first hand experience involved massage training with the fairer sex, it was always more powerful than relaying sensations through an expired doppelganger unknown currency inger. As he watched the chakra flow through the diagnostic jutsu, Naruto observed, "Interesting, the chakra flow seems to be a bit more stable now that the repairs have been made." The method offered the user a close-up view of the inner workings of any person they happened to see, but it was by no means Byakugan. Given that the user knew what they were looking at, it was very easy to observe heartbeats, respiration, and other natural functions. This was a useful ability for all medical professionals. Using those powers, Naruto looked into the origin of the newly discovered power, no matter how slight, and discovered that the lingering effects of his transformation could be eliminated more quickly by continuously reshaping chakra. Naruto muttered, "Very interesting," intrigued by the possibility of speeding up the familiarization process. After their first senses tutoring session, Kyuubi explained to him that the process was just Naruto's subconscious mind learning to fully comprehend all of its newly acquired abilities. As a result, Naruto finds the entire process frustratingly slow. Normally, the process begins at birth, so when a person starts learning to shape their chakra, their body and mind are in perfect harmony, allowing their chakra to form without any disruptions. Unfortunately, Naruto's mind and body were in a state of mild disarray due to the incident that occurred a few weeks earlier. This caused his chakra to be slightly disturbed, making all the cool things, such as medical jutsu, fundamental sealing, and genjutsu creation, temporarily out of his grasp. This created a bigger obstacle in each of those areas, so all of his teachers asked him to start reading up on his subjects in an effort to get around the roadblock. This allowed Naruto to catch up on his knowledge of each subject and save time on explanations when training resumed. Tenchi, who was teaching him kenjutsu and how to incorporate it into his fighting style, and Iruka, who was teaching him regular ninjutsu, were the only ones who weren't badly impacted. Nevertheless, they continued to give him reading because they were convinced that a deeper comprehension of their respective arts could only be advantageous. So he read, and even though he didn't learn hands-on, Naruto discovered that his enhanced intelligence allowed him to remember and understand what the books were telling. His curiosity was piqued instantly, and before the blonde realized it, a swarm of clones were following him every morning as they read and took notes on a wide range of topics at the library. Naruto's desire to learn more was so strong that he decided to expand his knowledge and diverge from the traditional technique scroll or history memoir. As a result, he found himself reading manifestos and economic and political guides, unwittingly preparing himself for his ultimate objective. Naruto briefly reflected on the idea of becoming Hokage before returning with a wistful sigh to his current situation and hoping that his body would quickly synchronize. I could force my subconscious mind to become accustomed to creating chakra in tandem with my body by channeling more chakra, Naruto told himself before he was struck by a flash of insight. But to do that I'd need to not only expend a dangerous amount of chakra but do it so quickly I undoubtedly complicate my injuries with severe chakra burns, he said. What if, as he cleansed his system, he used clones to control chakra? Since he had already studied so much in his medical textbooks that he might be able to teach an introductory class, the attempt couldn't hurt and was preferable to doing nothing. Thus, holding a water balloon in his right hand, Naruto leapt to his feet with renewed energy. Naruto was thrilled to see that his plan, to a certain extent, succeeded when he used a half-ram seal to summon a clone. Since his clone was channeling the chakra but only moderating it, Naruto could concentrate on flushing as much chakra out of his system as possible while his clone focused healing energies into the offended limb. However, there was still an incredible backlash, which made it unfit for clone usage. Naruto was experiencing an extremely strange sensation as a result of the procedure. It was as though his arm was caught between a cool breeze and a burning heat, causing him to alternate between pain and relief. After the clone had used up all of its healing chakra, Naruto cut the chakra link and discovered that his arm's chakra coils had once again become a little more stable, making them somewhat stand out when compared to the coils on the rest of his body. Naruto said to no one in particular, "Well, I guess I'm going to have to balance them out then, aren't I?" Before making 4 clones to control each of his primary limbs and eschewing the water balloon completely in favor of releasing enormous amounts of chakra from his arms and legs. The chakra displacement almost knocked Kyuubi off her tree branch, but she skillfully regained her balance and raised her gaze to the forest canopy with a cunning grace reminiscent of a wild fox. Was there recent movement there? The demonic vixen silently pondered as she allowed her gaze to rest on Naruto's training for a brief moment before returning her attention. In the tree line, the Yomi Queen was certain she saw something moving that was unquestionably bigger than a bird. Iruka yelled at the perspiring blonde as he stood on the surface of his man-made lake. Naruto, you have to use your chakra like a net, gathering the water so that the surface tension becomes great enough that you can form a semi-solid platform. To his credit, Naruto was performing far better than he had in the previous 2 weeks. However, water walking was a far more precise art than tree climbing, which only required the user to maintain their chakra within a fairly wide margin. This explains why Naruto was struggling with it so much as his coils stabilized. Iruka could see, though, that the process had advanced somewhat because Naruto could now stand on top of the water instead of hesitating for a short while before diving into the shallow depths. A splash, spoke too soon. Iruka moaned late as Naruto dove into the waist-deep water once more. Before the sun-kissed container came to the surface to express his annoyance to the world, a few irate bubbles rippled along the surface from the blonde underwater cry. The boy complained and then wade red to the edge of the bowl-shaped depression. Why can't this go any faster? I flushed my system for all it was worth, and after all that work I still can barely stand onto water, he said. Naruto climbed onto the edge of Iruka's earth jutsu and lay flat on his back, allowing his mind to rest and his eyes to look up at the sky before he erupted with more rage. It was unfair. He now had more teachers than he could handle, a mind that was attentive and all-encompassing, and all the chakra in the world, but he had absolutely no control over how to make anything happen. Furthermore, Kami is aware that he tried working away the issue. He had read about chakra control techniques and self-improvement techniques for hours, both virtually and physically, but to no avail. He doubted that a few poorly trained clones could stop any permanent damage from occurring, as even the one technique he could use to help could only do so much with continuous use. Then, much to the chagrin of his extremely impatient mind, he realized that he was trapped in this no-man's land of abysmal chakra control until his body was ready to move on. Iruka could relate to the feeling because he had devoted many hours to honing his chakra control skills in order to become proficient in the methods the Sandaime had taught him. It took patience and time to tame the 2 most untamed elements, earth and fire, which were as natural to him as the air he breathed. Like the Anbu Grade Academy teacher, Naruto was learning that lesson himself, and the blonde boy was embracing it like a sand dune. Even Kyuubi, who was indifferently observing them from a distance, couldn't come up with a solution because her best recommendation had been some secret technique training, which, in all honesty, only worked until Naruto had to quit or risk further delaying his training due to the harm he had caused to himself. No, Iruka thought, recognizing that the blonde's attempt to push the issue aside was doing more harm than good. Naruto needs something to distract him from the actual process. The academy teacher suddenly had an idea, like one of the Sandame's Raiden Jutsu, and he realized that he would have to follow in the footsteps of his predecessor. Iruka approached Naruto with a smile on his face at the mere prospect of the exercise, eager to discover how much he and the blonde actually resembled each other. Iruka entered Naruto's view of the sky above and said, "Naruto, I think it's time we tried a different approach." Naruto just sighed and dragged himself to his feet after blinking once. The Uzumaki Namikaze heir was not a quitter, despite the fact that all the reasoning in his head told him it was pointless. Despite how difficult their trials were, he and Iruka found solace in that fact. Naruto's skepticism temporarily overcame his eagerness as he asked, "What do you have in mind, Iruka?" "Sensei, because I honestly don't know where to go from here." Naruto received a few hand seals instead, but all he could do was watch in amazement as his sensei performed a flawless Shunshin and no pop, no smoke, just a phasing in and out of existence. As they left, Kyuubi got up and complained to herself about how incredibly impolite some people can be. Kyuubi tensed for a moment as she sensed something rapidly approaching, and she bit back a few remarks that were inappropriate for her dignified form, or at least that was what she told herself. A bitter taste of vulnerability lingered in her mouth as she was once again forced to face the limitations of her proxy. Human body, cursing her ignorance. It was a slap in the face for her to go from being able to identify even the smallest living form within her nearly limitless Yuki to hardly being able to distinguish a shinobi as they shunshined directly in front of her. The masked figure in front of her became tense at the mere thought, which made her face snarl like a fox. The Anbu mumbled in icy monotone, "You would be wise to calm yourself, woman. I have orders to kill when attacked." After his metamorphosis, the masked man was no taller than Naruto and wore a white outfit that resembled the black cloak worn by the blonde. If not for his height and the death of the aforementioned Hokage, the man, suspiciously adorned with a flame pattern, might have been mistaken for a masked Yondaime. That did not, however, allay Kyuubi's fears, as the unidentified shinobi indicated his intention to follow through on his earlier statements by reaching for his scabbarded ninjutsu on his back. After hearing the terrible sound, Kyuubi concluded that he must be using a jutsu of some sort, one that would distort his real voice so that it could never be recognized. Her suspicions were all heightened by the fact that the man in front of her was employing this tactic. Why would he wait until she was by herself before approaching her, and what were his intentions? Were only a few of the more salient ideas that were going through the demon's mind, none of which produced a viable solution. This did little to ease the vixen's tension. "As I said before, calm yourself. I only have orders to kill when attacked," the Anbu repeated. In an attempt to come up with a defense, Kyuubi shot back, "So are you here to subdue me then, because I'm sure you wouldn't have waited until I was alone just to talk to me?" Similar to the previous Rasengan training, she was unable to use most, if not all, of her Yuki techniques until she was able to control her body. This, in turn, depended on Naruto improving his chakra control because her limitations were linked to his. Given that she was unable to shape Yuki into chakra and that her body was as brittle as wet tissue paper in comparison to her opponents, the woman was left essentially defenseless. If Naruto and Iruka were close enough to sense the flare, her only hope would be if she could somehow make her Yuki sufficiently intense to notify them of her current predicament. "You overestimate your worth to my master, as well as underestimate our intelligence. We know that you are a mere clone, and what's more, we know what you are a clone of. However, that information is not important to us. What is important are your current intentions for the village," the Anbu said, and with that he took an aggressive posture. Even though it wasn't made very clear, traces of ki that were still present around the man's form were detectable by Kyuubi's buffered senses. Recalling her special genin status, Kyuubi retorted, "I don't have to answer to you or your master. The only person I even have to consider speaking with is the Hokage himself, and assuming from this secretive meeting, he doesn't have anything to do with this." Additionally, Kyuubi recognized that another faction was aware of her true identity and that, based on appearances, they were not affiliated with the Hokage. "Well, that definitely complicates things," Kyuubi said to herself, attempting to downplay the gravity of the circumstance. The fox released all of her nervous energy while the Anbu stood silently trying to figure out how to respond to Kyuubi's comment because any tension or anxiety would only make things more complicated, something that was already being done well enough. Kyuubi's mind started to clear and her amazing thinking abilities could begin to function as she allowed the anxious energy to gradually leave her system. "The facts are that he is clearly working with the Hokage and is aware of my true identity. It's possible that they are posing as someone who has already passed away, have broken into the Hokage's intelligence headquarters, or are collaborating with an Enbu rogue unit. Kyuubi's analysis was swift because a lot of theories were developed and considered before being determined to be implausible or unlikely. Motive: currently unknown. The renegade Anbu seemed most appropriate at the moment, and based on her knowledge of the organization from Naruto's studies, she was certain that the true organization was devoted to their cage leader until the end. However, that theory raised two questions. What were his intentions and to whom were they now loyal? But those couldn't be addressed unless she could persuade the Anbu to speak, which appeared less and less likely the longer the silence lasted. Before vanishing from view, the Anbu said, "It seems like this meeting was a waste of time, but be warned that any aggression towards our village will only end in your annihilation, and to prove our point." As though it had been tightly coiled inside, Kyuubi's Yuki sprang out, but it started to significantly diminish before it could reach noticeable levels. The vixen matriarch thought, "What in the world?" As she sensed a familiar chakra. The woman was hit with a single finger strike, leaving her perplexed as to what method a human could employ to potentially negate pure Yuki, even in such a small amount. Kyuubi was struck squarely in the sternum, and before she could blink, she was a cloud of smoke, her consciousness rushing to its container. The Anbu said over his concealed headset, "Mission complete," reporting to Danzo now, and then vanished in a smokeless shunshin. As his genuine self as a teacher once again emerged, Iruka asked Naruto casually, "Naruto, do you know why the forests of Konohagakure are so special?" But even with Naruto's renewed interest in his studies, the boy's knowledge of his village's past had diminished, and he was unable to recall any obscure historical facts he might have known while still seeing stars because of a certain Anbu's shunshin. Iruka took Naruto's silence as a "no," and went on, "These forests are no more than 90 years old, and yet they stand just as tall as any tree more than millennia old." Gazing up at one of the aforementioned trees with awe, Iruka wished to teach him the same lesson that the Sandaime had previously taught him. This is because of Senju Vishimera, the man who would become the first Hokage, and the original owner of the Will of Fire. This forest was his gift to his village, in which he changed the barren land of fire into a lush forest where all life could prosper, Iruka said, his inner fire shining for Naruto to observe. What Naruto witnessed was something more than pride or patriotism. It was something more profound. No, Naruto saw the same thing that every Konoha shinobi saw when they went to battle, when they fought for their loved ones, and when they sacrificed their lives for their village. Naruto witnessed Iruka embodying the will of fire, which was the same will his father possessed when he sealed the Kyuubi. The sight itself was breathtaking, if a little intimidating. Because who am I to think of myself as equal to someone who has a great deal of faith, that's the word faith, in their cause? Naruto asked, genuinely wondering what he was doing for the first time. He had always aspired to be a shinobi since he was a young child, and his desire only grew stronger after he saw how much respect one could earn just by being a shinobi. Therefore, it was only natural for him to want to be respected by his peers as a despised and friendless outcast. But when he realized what a Konoha shinobi ought to be like, he began to doubt everything. Am I acting appropriately? Is my aspiration to become Hokage a fabrication? Naruto's question shook him from the bottom of his heart. Whether they screamed it to the heavens like he did or secretly wished for it like a certain Hyuga did for the said blonde, being Hokage was something that every shinobi wanted. Now that he was questioning his decision to become a shinobi, it was only a step further until he was questioning his dream to be Hokage. You know, Naruto, you and the Shoden Sama are very alike, and I'm not talking about that fact that you both are relate. When you saved me back there in the Uchiha catacombs, I couldn't help but realize that you, someone so much younger than I, had already inherited that gift in which the first left all of us. It was inspiring really to see you give your all just to save a comrade, which is what I believe the first meant when he said he entrusted that will of fire to us. He wanted us to protect what was precious, and you showed me that without a doubt you could do that even when the odds were against you, Iruka confessed, unaware he'd solved. The blonde in question was stunned by how quickly his teacher had clarified a lot of things for him, and he could only watch with his mouth open. Iruka, quite frankly, showed him that he was ideal for the position when he was doubting whether he should even be a shinobi. Despite their intention to do the exact opposite, the teacher's words were extremely humbling. Naruto responded, "Thank you, Iruka. Sensei, I think I finally realize what a shinobi is supposed to be," to which his sensei raised an incredulous eyebrow. Naruto laughed to himself and dismissed it with a wave of his hand before posing his own query. Naruto asked, gazing up at the towering heights all around him, "So Iruka, Sensei, why did you bring me out here? Is there something about this place that'll help me master my chakra?" Before waving a chakra filled hand over a particularly large tree, Iruka explained, Yes, as a matter of that there is. Because as I mentioned before, these trees are a gift from our previous Hokage to us, the inheritors of this land. With that said, we must protect this land, a fact the Shoden too realized, so he made sure to add these seals to each of the various sections of forestry. The complex sealing power, which Naruto could partially identify from his studies, was engraved in the bark. The part he recognized was the glyph that said the sealed item could be changed or manipulated in some way. Iruka instantly put this into effect by channeling a small amount of chakra into the seal, which caused the entire area to twist into a current training field. Iruka and he were separated by a path of rushing water, and thousands, if not millions, of leaves covered the tops of the trees. Naruto gazed about in unbridled wonder at the change occurring. A narrow stand of trees had given way to a meandering stream of rushing water that led to a rocky waterfall 10 stories high. Naruto's interest in Iruka, who didn't appear to be at all tired, only grew when the Anbu-level teacher took a bell out of one of his pockets and pierced it with a senbon that he launched almost a mile away toward the waterfall. The bell was still strung to the metal needle when the senbon buried itself beneath a protruding rock beneath the waterfall, preventing it from being washed away. Naruto, this is the exercise Sarutobi. Sama introduced me to when I was having problems with my chakra control. He said it was pasted to him by our first Hokage when he himself was having control problems. So before you have any doubts, know this is a time-tested method, Iruka said. With wide eyes and a strong desire to start, Naruto simply nodded. Trying to control his excitement, the hyperactive blonde asked, "So what do I have to do?" Iruka smirked and said, "All you have to do is beat me to the bell," before soaring into the trees. When he heard his teacher say, "That's all, hey wait stop you cheater, you started before me," Naruto's feelings of sibling rivalry boiled over at the prospect of a contest. Naruto was undoubtedly enjoying himself more than he had in a long time. As opposed to just practicing water walking or tree climbing, the combination of a foot race, capture the flag, and tag was unquestionably the best way to overcome the frustrations of honing one's chakra control, because it allowed Naruto to let his mind concentrate on something else while instinct took over the actual control application. Naruto discovered that controlling his chakras was similar to walking. All he needed to do was find his balance and let his body take care of the rest. As Naruto leapt from tree to tree, his senses alert and his thrilling mounting growing with every second, he realized, so I was just overthinking it then. There had always been a flash of fists or a spray of metal in his few meetings with Iruka, which made the game all the more thrilling for the cunning blonde. Even Naruto, though, could tell that the academy instructor was being forgiving of him because he only allowed him to score a haymaker to demonstrate to him that he was up against a clone. "It's a trap." When he stumbled over some wiring, the blonde yelled. Thanks to his newly developed senses, Naruto clung to the smooth bark with chakra as he twisted in the air and caught his foot on a nearby branch, once again demonstrating the drastic change his body underwent as a result of the incident. Naruto kicked off the branch as soon as he saw a log headed his way and easily avoided the wiring-sprung trap. Landing on a nearby branch, Naruto's smile widened as he became aware that he was enjoying himself more and more as he progressed through Iruka's tests. Naruto launched himself at his target with even greater vigor, avoiding blunted kunai and other concealed obstacles in his path. Iruka's traps, his poor chakra control, or even an entire Anbu squad couldn't stop him from achieving his objective, and it was with this mindset that Naruto arrived at the base of the waterfall, unfazed by the mile-long run through a forest full of traps. Using only his exteroceptive senses to steer clear of the barrage of projectiles being thrown at him from behind, Naruto ran up the mass of falling water, disregarding caution. Naruto sensed that he was getting closer to his objective with every falling step, and his sense of invincibility returned. "Nothing can stop me. I can't and won't stop," in his mind, Naruto roared, the idea reverberating throughout his body and, if it were possible, urging it to move even more quickly. When he jumped for the senbon, bound, bell, his speed propelled him upward, but as his fingers closed around his target, a transparent hand appeared out of nothingness and grabbed it. Before plummeting to the warm waters below, Naruto, clutching nothing air, began up at a grinning Iruka. Before he hit the punch bowl that had formed beneath the rushing waters above, the blonde did nothing to slow his fall or even cover himself. Iruka stood crouching over Naruto's floating form and joked, "Fun huh? You just wished you'd expected the unexpected?" Half submerged, the blonde could only gaze up at his teacher's beaming face, silhouetted by the sun overhead, before letting out a long sigh. He had a strong desire to win, and he thought he might have felt the cool metal of the bell before it was taken away without even a chime. Naruto lay on the smooth gray gravel, idling and tossing a pebble up and down while gazing up at the sky once more. He tread water until he reached the shoreline of the waterfall's bowl. For obvious reasons, he felt defeated even though he felt accomplished because he had finally walked without too much difficulty. He was a little unsure of his feelings because of the two opposing feelings. Had he failed the test that had been handed down through the generations by the Hokage family? Or had he simply demonstrated that, provided he didn't worry about it, he was capable of doing something? Iruka said, "You did good, Naruto. Well, at least certainly better than I did when Sarutobi Sama introduced me to this exercise," dispelling the confusion that had previously obscured the blonde campaigner's mind. Naruto loudly interrupted, "So getting the bell was never the true objective." Iruka explained, somewhat irritating his Otodo by essentially saying he could beat him at anything and everything. "Of course not. You are far too inexperienced to beat me in any sort of skill-based competition. If I wanted, I could have had the bell back in my hands as soon as you laid eyes on it. No, this little game was to get you to relax a little and learn at a more natural pace," he said. Naruto raised an eyebrow and asked, "You're saying that my tension over trying to master my chakra control was what was slowing me down, and not the newest of my coils?" Before heading to a nearby tree, Iruka remarked, "No, but your anxiety definitely had something to do with it, and it turned out I was right, because as soon as you got into the game, your control problems didn't seem so bad, did they?" Naruto remarked, "Not really, but water. Walking is still like trying to walk through quicksand, before trailing behind his sensei." And once more, Iruka transformed the waterfall back into a straightforward forest clearing by simply waving his hand to activate a seal that the Shoden Hokage had placed. Naruto couldn't help but get a little excited for Seal's training that day as he watched the rock formation vanish back into the earth and the water torrents be sucked into the depths of the terrain. And it would be even better if Anko showed up sober. Hopefully, Naruto exclaimed. After it happened twice in one day, he realized that the blonde had embarrassed himself more than she did by seeing his somewhat eccentric sensei a little too inebriated on multiple occasions. His only worry, though, was not for the snake's general well-being. He had discovered the hard way that she could kick his ass even when intoxicated, but rather for himself, since creating seals while intoxicated could have some terrible consequences. Naruto temporarily put demolition grade explosive tags out of his mind and returned his attention to the task at hand, or, more accurately, the absence of one. Looking up at the silently mumbling Chunin, Naruto's smile turned sly as he remembered the vow Iruka had made a few weeks prior to teach him elemental ninjutsu. Naruto sarcastically asked, "So are we going to start jutsu theory today, or is there another test I have to pass before I get to that?" While threatening to cage Bunshin his sensei for the following week if he had to undergo another chakra control exercise. Unaware that Naruto had overheard him muttering something about chakra formulas, Iruka casually waved his hand in response. "Yes, I was just thinking of a way to explain jutsu theory to you so that we won't waste any time training to go over complex notions and whatnot," he said. To be honest, Iruka did nothing to allay the blonde's mounting anxiety when she declared, "Not to worry, but I think I've got the simplest explanation in mind. Basically, jutsu theory is like algebra. Each handseal, x, in other words, are added together in an equation. Each of the x are paired with a specific amount of chakra, your constant in other words, to form your y, or your jutsu. This is why chakra control is so important in jutsu theory, because faulty control can utterly destroy a jutsu, and in higher level jutsu utterly change the desired effects. However, the margin of error is fairly wide in the few jutsu you are about to learn, so there isn't much to worry about now, seeing as your coils are still localizing themselves. Though if you want to go on to higher levels of jutsu theory, or even create your own jutsu, your chakra control is only going to have to get better for you to achieve those goals," Iruka worded, careful not to make Naruto's head spin right away. Unfortunately, what he had just heard turned out to be a jumble of words and unclear phrases, despite his increased intelligence. To a discouraged Iruka, Naruto said, "Okay, one more time, only this time with the x, e's, and equations part." Perhaps a little naively, the Academy hoped Naruto would have a natural talent for this kind of thing. But Iruka assumed that not everyone could be like him in the third after remembering what his sensei had said. Notwithstanding his natural skills, Iruka knew he would have to teach Naruto something new. It just appeared that Naruto would now need to approach this differently than he had originally planned. After saying, "Not to worry, Naruto, I have a backup explanation," Iruka executed a single seal before a quartet of standard Bunshin appeared on either side of him. "These here are examples of spatial reconstruction. You remember that from your reading?" The man's mood slightly improved when he nodded in response to Iruka's query. At least his job was a little easier because Naruto had completed the reading as he had requested. Good because in essence that is half of jutsu theory, which is A. Using chakra to create effects in regards to just space, or B. Iruka said, and then a tiny flame ignited on her forefinger. Iruka went on, observing a frown appear on Naruto's face. Use chakra to create effects in regards to the elements. The key divider in these two aspects are hand seals, which, like I said before, are like math, she said. The boy interrupted angrily, which is the one part one don't understand, because he believed that a series of abstract numbers that, in practice, meant nothing stood in the way of the full awesomeness of ninjutsu. Iruka praised Naruto for his rather unique mastery of fuinjutsu, saying, not many people do it first, but give it time. Trust me, I've seen the way you go through seals, and compared to that this stuff is elementary. Perhaps it was in his genes, but he understood seals as easily as a fish could breathe water. To him, seals were essentially a game. All you needed to do was write down the rules, or the ink work, and then watch as everything else unfolded as you wanted it to. That way of thinking made seals so easy for Naruto, but it also made jutsu theory seem more like homework than anything else. Naruto rambled to his teacher, that's because seals are fun, but I guess if you say it'll get easier, growing more committed to succeeding in this specific field. Iruka said, good because for your first jutsu, and then he snapped once more, this time with all of his fingers on fire. You're going to be learning this, and Naruto's desire only grew stronger after hearing that. One Sarutobi Hiruzen muttered, this is rather unsettling, and put down his pipe. Never combining business and pleasure is the first rule of effective leadership, and for the sagely monkey lord, anything that might involve Danzo meant, all business. I understand the attack on my persons, and I'd foreseen something of this nature happening had my true identity been discovered. Kyuubi continued, convinced that this Danzo character was up to no good. What bothers me, though, is this Danzo's interest in Naruto. She was able to survive the incident, which was at best a one-time occurrence, because she had successfully created another Kage Bunshin by splitting her Yuki in the final moments of her clone's life. In actuality, it shouldn't have occurred because of the stark power disparity between Chakra and Yuki, but it wasn't impossible because the technique relied more on one raw power than on any kind of control. Kyuubi also recognized the great luck of that occurrence. It was frequently difficult for her to obtain the name of a higher up in a village conspiracy. Danzo has always been as devoted as a zealot when it comes to the will of fire, and its supposed ideal Konoha, Hiruzen stated. The words left him with a bad taste in his mouth because Danzo's vision of the ideal Konoha was very different from what the village's founders desired. Kyuubi asked, feeling as though she already knew the answer, and that is? A Konoha that has conquered every surrounding country, and has tapped into every available resource for making a more effective war engine. The man simply eats, sleeps, and dreams of conquest. So much in fact that I am surprised I was named Hokage, given that we were in the biggest war ever during that time, the Hokage said, reinforcing Kyuubi's. She could vouch for the fact that power was the most genuinely corrupt of all entities. But in her brief time with Naruto, she had learned that there are people whose moral character is far higher than hers and this Danzo's that could withstand the ultimate temptation of power. Because they were the ones who sought power only to safeguard and preserve what was valuable, not because of the benefits it might offer. The essence of Naruto's objective was to find the one act of selflessness within a path of selfishness. Kyuubi warned, so it all boils to greed yet again. I'd advise handling this problem quickly Hokage-san. Otherwise the consequences may be dire for us all, suggesting that the equally troubled professor would not escape her own fall. Yes, but when dealing with Danzo, it is never that simple. His intentions for Naruto may merely be to further any plot he has brewing for further down the road, so actively engaging him now may prove futile as there would be no grounds to charge him on, Hiruzen said with anger. Danzo was only a retired shinobi because Root didn't really exist, at least not as far as the General Council and Fire Lord knew. As the leader of a military organization, Sarutobi had no authority over ordinary citizens, so this made him untouchable. I have the option of telling the council about everything, but doing so would expose to the civilian representatives all the secrets that the ninja delegates have hidden throughout the village. The Hokage remarked cynically, not to mention the impending talk with the Fire Lord himself, and the ever so interesting conversation on why information was withheld from him, realizing that Danzo had once again done a good job of hiding his tracks. However, this was to be expected because it was only a matter of time to learn all the rules and loopholes when you had played the game for as long as Danzo had. Be that as it may, I have a request, Kyuubi said, bringing the Hokage out of his reverie. Even though Danzo is a general pain in everyone's side and a nuisance, Anyone would be drawn to him if they were feared as the god of shinobi, and asked for a favor from a nearly timeless demon. Using appropriate titles, the Hokage mimicked Kyuubi's previous gesture and asked, "What might that be, Kasumi-san?" Still a little miffed at being killed, Kyuubi recalled, "I need a way to reinforce this body, enough for actually combat usage. I thought a Yuki coating may be enough, but as that Anbu proved today, one particularly skilled skill can spell the end. For Kami's sake, she was the strongest of the Biju. Her passing ought to have an impact on all planes of existence rather than taking place in a remote forest where not even the tiniest insects were agitated. I may have a few seals that could do the trick, but to be safe have Naruto and Anko go over them as well. Another 2 sets of eyes couldn't hurt, and from what I've heard Naruto has turned himself into quite the seal student," the Hokage suggested while presenting Kyuubi with a scroll. Even the Hokage was unaware of her seal research because if word spread that the demon fox was actually studying sealing. Knowing what would actually happen to her and her warder, Kyuubi joked sarcastically, the masses would rise up in a fury unseen by this world to date. The Hokage recalled his studies of the art of to capture or to kill, and said, "As for your attacker, I will look into the root Anbu files my agents have managed to glean from Danzo's offices. From your description of his abilities, I'd say he was a veteran, for mastering the Anbu style of close-quarters combat would take years in the least." Namikaze Kenjutsu and Senju Taijutsu were combined to create Konoha Anbu Taijutsu. The 2 clans had left the village as another gift to protect it, and it was by far the most successful. Taijutsu was created to make it easy for its practitioner to defeat an adversary. Because the user could defeat an opponent with or without weapons, the style was similar to Jujutsu. Nonetheless, Kenjutsu was used in light of the second half of the art, the to kill portion. Simply becoming one with the sword was the swordsmanship that underpinned the style. There would be no hidden finishers or special techniques once the person merged their soul with the sword. The real power of Anbu, or Namikaze Kenjutsu, lay in its ability to allow its practitioners to fight as though their weapon were an extension of their own will to kill. Recalling Hieshi's firm stance in support of Naruto following that one fateful night regarding his eldest daughter, Kyuubi reasoned, agreed his technique was too mature for someone so young to completely master, but in my last moments I recognized a chakra burst similar to the explanation of the Hyuga clan's Jukena. As for that means I cannot tell you, because it is possible that someone within the Hokage works for the Root Anbu squad, or that someone is trying to drive a wedge between Naruto and the Hyuga. The Hokage had plenty to ponder over this. Root completely undermined his authority in order to move in the open. The Mist could attest to the fact that civil wars were sparked by this kind of renegade activism, but under the circumstances, the attackers were untouchable. A new power was emerging, and he would need to be vigilant now more than ever. One for which he and Danzo were now competing. With a loud snap, Naruto said, "This is so cool," as his fingers parted, revealing a lone flame hovering over his ring finger. The first of several fire jutsu found inside the Leaf Village's historic walls was Kaden Tenka, fire release. Ignition, but Naruto's attention was not diverted from the tiny flame he was currently maintaining on the tip of his finger by the promise of destroying entire villages with a few hand seals and an abundance of chakra, which he possessed in spades. When he first witnessed a ninja in action, nothing could divert his attention from the hazy shapes, and suddenly, nothing could divert his focus from the flame. This was one of Naruto's rare moments of clarity because, for the first time, he truly knew what he was doing when he executed that seemingly haphazard hand seal arrangement. The information was just as thrilling as the bell test a short while ago. Iruka threw 3 different scrolls at the blonde and said, "Yes, but it's time to move on. We lost some ground getting your chakra back up to par, but it was time well spent because now these shouldn't take you more than a few hours to get down." Before catching the 3 pieces of parchment with one hand, Naruto instinctively disengaged his chakra, which was fueling the fire. Observing that each of the 3 scrolls had a unique border, Naruto selected the red rimmed scroll over the deep blue and teal ones. To his surprise, he also discovered 2 additional fire jutsu. Considering that the first one was merely Kaden Tenka written out, another jutsu truly brightened his day. Naruto glanced at the other 2 scrolls, then back at his adopted older brother after tearing through the explanation and raising an eyebrow. Iruka nodded, confirming the Namikaze heir's suspicions, even though the blonde's statement seemed more like a statement than a question. "I guess these are all introductory jutsu to my respective elements, correct? Like I said before, they should be a quick learn, but I'd advise at least reading them along with your clones before you delegate them any more work. Each scroll has a basic explanation of how that respective element is traditionally manipulated by chakra. Understanding that will be paramount when you decide to start making your own jutsu, the Chunin said. Iruka realized he had unleashed a monster when a cheeky grin appeared on the blonde's face. This monster could draw from her vast reserves and use her creativity to shape them into jutsu that the world has never seen before, making Konoha shudder even more than the powerful Kyuubi. Iruka said, "Well, we're here," while glancing up at the Konoha hospital. He felt bad because, before letting Naruto loose on a location where the injured and ill were attempting to recuperate, he had excited him about the idea of creating his own jutsu. The Chunin testified, "A truly despicable thing," before turning away and whistling a lively melody. It was no longer his problem, as far as he was concerned. Kabuto whispered wearily, "Now Naruto, I need you to remember we are really doing rounds, so no more practicing jutsu." After battling Naruto and multiple clones while attempting to use all 3 of the elemental jutsu techniques he had learned for his scrolls. Due to the amount of paperwork that was blown around, only the futon, Bufu, wind release, Gale, and futon, Uzu, wind release, swirl, caused any issues in retrospect. Because there was always a clone ready to use Sweden, Gyoshu, water release, condensation, and Sweden, Shinko, water release, precipitation, at any indication of a sustained fire, neither Kaden, Tenka nor Kaden, Hokushi, fire release, Spitfire, caused too much trouble. Naruto simply nodded. After reading the scrolls and sending clones to practice further, he had no problem delaying the creation of jutsu. He finally had some semblance of chakra control to put his book knowledge to use when it came time for med training. Naruto had been working on improving his clinical knowledge in medical training for the last 14 or so days. In addition to studying everything Kabuto asked him, he would also read a few other books to broaden his knowledge. But despite all of his book knowledge, the mystery of the human body was still far from being solved. After studying for a few days, he came to the conclusion that he would never be able to fully comprehend something he had never practiced in his life. No matter how much he read about it, nothing short of actual physical practice would make him understand what it was like to reset a bone back into place. Thus, Naruto had to swallow a mouthful of proverbial hesitation before he willed his fingers into the proper hand seals when Kabuto asked him to activate his Shinryo no Jutsu diagnosis technique. The boy's mind was filled with hazy emptiness as he felt his chakra pool around his hands. The jutsu avoided using optical nerves altogether by transmitting images straight to the brain. Naruto and other novice users were tempted to close their eyes in order to concentrate on the mental image they were seeing. However, since the majority of medics would be field medics and any moment of vulnerability could be disastrous in the field, the practice was despised. Keeping that in mind, Naruto approached the patient who was sleeping, his thoughts split between the overwhelming, first-time feeling, keeping his eyes open, and watching the images that were flashing in his mind. It wasn't until Kabuto began reading her medical chart that he realized who it was. Then Kabuto checked for any other symptoms or allergies he should be aware of. Uchiha Akane, age 7. Suffering from mild chakra exhaustion and fatigue, has been ordered bed rest and observation until further notice, he said. Akane-chan? Naruto cried, glancing down at the girl who was just beginning to sleep. She had been awakened from her light sleep by his exclamation, and she rubbed the sand from her eyes with a tiny fist. At least the one eye that wasn't wearing an eye patch, anyway. The normally out of place accessory balanced the little girl's the side ponytail so well that it almost looked appropriate on her face. On the other hand, the young girl's strange face dressing gave her a spooky sense of maturity. One that made Naruto realize why she was here in the first place. The entire Uchiha clan was murdered by Uchiha Itachi. The entire event felt to Naruto like a big dream that he didn't want to believe was real. Like the Sarutobi was to Konoha, Itachi was to him. When Naruto turned into a shinobi, he was the epitome of everything he aspired to be. In classes where children of famous clans had an inherent advantage over him, Naruto was motivated to work harder by Itachi's emphasis on skill rather than bloodlines. Furthermore, Naruto realized that no human was genuinely superior to another because of the man's distant demeanor, which stood in sharp contrast to the arrogant nature of his caste. Demon sealed or not. Naruto would not, therefore, accept that everything he had seen and admired in Itachi was a lie, created in front of his eyes and the eyes of everyone else. Unaware of the enormity of the task, Naruto vowed, "I'll find Itachi, wherever he is, and make him tell me why, even if I have to beat it out of him." That was a problem for another day, though, because the blonde's entire focus was on the girl next to him who was stirring and what he was going to say to her. "How are you doing, Akane-chan?" Looking at the blonde with one piercing eye, the girl uttered only, "Jubei," Call me Jubei. Realizing how soulless the little girl's eyes were, Naruto recoiled in his mind. Naruto continued, Itachi has a lot to answer for, before dismissing the idea once more. Naruto asked, his curiosity overriding his professionalism, why Jubei? Although the girl's small and delicate features were not suited for such a masculine name, Naruto somehow sensed the significance of the name from the tone used when it was spoken. Naruto couldn't ignore the girl's request because the name carried so much emotion and power, but he also couldn't let his curiosity go. Kabuto interrupted, attracting both Naruto's inquisitive and Akane's serious attention. It says here that her older brother's name was Jubei. He was one of the few active Uchiha without a Sharingan, but made up for it with his impressive Kenjutsu. Interesting, do you think that Tonto over there could have been his? Kabuto asked. The little girl's eyes were too jaded to be those of a 7-year-old, and the silver-haired genin actually gave a noticeable shudder when he looked into them. In an attempt to get the girl to engage in conversation and break out of her funk, Naruto asked, so you want to be called Jubei so that you can remember your brother? The young child repeated, no, Aniki said that if he ever went missing it was up to me to make sure that his name became famous around the world. I'm just keeping my promise, with a hint of emotion slipping into her voice as she spoke, making her appear slightly more innocent in the eyes of the two genins. The girl merely nodded in agreement. Okay then Jubei-chan, I'll make sure that you can fulfill that promise, but you'll have to help me by getting a lot of rest, Naruto persuaded. Since she had just woken up, Naruto was anticipating a fight, but the girl's unquestioning obedience only served to highlight her abnormal maturity and the wounds Itachi had caused her. Naruto did a final scan on the girl's system and discovered that she was improving steadily and would soon be able to walk again. Naruto thought morbidly, but to Wera, before realizing the girl had nowhere to go. Fortunately, though, she would be staying with some loving family rather than ending up in an orphanage like he had. A hint of relief crept into Naruto's consciousness at that moment. Before leaving the sleeping child's room, Naruto reflected, that's what she needs, a couple of loving parents and maybe some kids her age to help her cope with her loss. Both genin exchanged a glance once they were outside, indicating that they were both thinking the same thing. Whatever had happened to that girl had left her far from normal. The blonde was heading toward Team 8 when an overly excited Inuzuka Kiba yelled, Oi Naruto, we gonna spar again today? Team 8 had been in operation for 2 weeks, while his own squad had not yet been put together. The team had finished more than a dozen humiliating D-class missions in those 2 weeks, and it didn't appear that this would be changing anytime soon. Knowing this, Naruto was able to comprehend Kiba's constant desire to spar with him whenever he went for genjutsu training. I don't mind at all. As he considered the boy's offer, Naruto recalled, when I was struggling with my genjutsu because of my chakra control, slapping Kiba around was almost therapeutic. Genjutsu should be within the realm of plausibility because he had previously demonstrated that his chakra control was sufficient to begin jutsu theory and the basic principles of medical training. But Naruto never shied away from a battle. The blonde gave in and created a dozen clones, briefly vanishing in a cloud of smoke, before his doppelganger unknown currency ingers all headed spiriting off to Kurenai to begin their training. Sure, why not, but give me a second, he said. Kiba simply complained about the unfairness of that technique before assuming a fighting stance. He reasoned that at least he had gotten what he wanted before slowly circling Naruto like a wolf sizing up its prey. Unaware of Naruto's transformation, Kiba jabbed, "You ready for this, Uzumaki?" Even so, it was puzzling how the dead Academy alumnus could have suddenly developed into such a promising shinobi. The blonde still had a long way to go before he could even pose a threat to someone with his level of skill, so it wasn't that he was jealous or anything, but it was somewhat unexpected to watch Naruto change right in front of his eyes. With a savage grin, Kiba continued, "I'd bet there's one other person here that'd agree with me there," before glancing at his flushed teammate on the sidelines. Hinata blushed even more as she ducked from Kiba's look and saw that Naruto had followed the dog boy's eyes to her before beaming at her. Every day, she would give anything to see that smile. Unfortunately, she had not even had the guts to approach him, let alone express how he made her feel. The aforementioned blonde was totally oblivious to the internal struggle that had escalated over the previous week when her team began gathering for Naruto's genjutsu training. Given all of Kiba's insulting comments when the two were even close to one another, that fact alone was intimidating. However, Kiba's remarks were simply too embarrassing for the bashful Hyuga doormat, and Naruto was unable to delve too deeply into Kiba's remarks due to his unwavering focus on his studies. In addition to making Hinata's face flush to a critical level, Kiba's taunt, "Oi Hinata, you wanna spar with Naruto-kun too? His taijutsu really sucks," and I'd bet the Hyuga heiress herself could at least show a talentless schmuck like him a thing or two, also made the blonde with the taijutsu deficit sulk. I doubt Hinata-chan would even want to waste her time teaching me something I won't even need to kick your ass. Naruto shot back, utterly disregarding Kiba's stuttering retort. He gave Hinata a knowing look, which caused the girl to fall back, temporarily dead to the world. Knowing that it would be his responsibility to bring the fallen heiress back to life, Shino let out his first audible reaction to Naruto's arrival. It was a little annoying to constantly clean up the mess in Kiba and Naruto's attics, even for the Zen. Like young Aburame. Enough so that Shino felt compelled to demonstrate to Naruto how genuinely annoying his ignorance was. In a moment, Shino said, Uzumaki-san, when you're done with Kiba, I'd like to fight you as well, in a voice that was entirely unfamiliar to his teammate. The two circling contenders stared up at Shino in disbelief, one because it was the first time he had ever heard the boy speak, and the other because he had never asked the guy to spar during the 2 weeks he had been paired with him. Naruto's response only made Kiba more irritated. Sure, I'll even make this quick so that you don't have to wait too long, he said. Kiba jabbed his thumb in the direction Shino was sitting and said, so what am I, cat litter? I'll mop the floor with you Uzumaki before moving on to Bug Boy over there. The boy's better hearing picked up a faint buzz that was barely perceptible. Naruto roared, oh yeah, well dodge this. Kaden. Hokushi, and blasted a narrow stream of fire at the flat-footed Inuzuka. With a subconscious flaring of his ankle, Kiba was able to stumble away from danger because, fortunately for the feral preteen, his instincts were as refined as those of any Inuzuka pack animal. But he was unable to escape Naruto's newfound speed with his awkward dodge. Kiba was able to observe as Naruto closed the gap between them while his foot was in mid-strike for a low roundhouse to the head as the line of fire sailed over his shoulder, singeing the fur lining his hood. But luckily for Kiba, Naruto was actually terrible at taijutsu, and his taunts weren't just empty words. Kiba stopped Naruto's kick with one hand before grinning arrogantly at the blonde as he overpowered him with just one arm. I told you, that's not enough, Kiba roared, passing a few well-known seals through his hands. Kiba felt his chakra surge inside him as he knelt on all fours and then coiling around his arms and legs to greatly strengthen them. Now, moving faster than the blonde Kiba, he charged forward, shoulder first, into the chest of the limping Uzumaki. The container flew across the field after the blow struck deep. The on-looking Hyuga heiress winced at each of Naruto's ground-skipping maneuvers, which came to an end when the agonizing collision with a tree caused the pale onlooker to gasp. When the boy didn't jump to his feet as he usually did, but instead lay motionless while Kiba teased him, Hinata had to physically stop herself from running to his side. What a wuss. Come on now, I only hit you once, what about kicking my ass? Naruto screamed. I planned to Kiba, as his fist struck the dog boy's fast, sending him flying across the field as he had done previously. Kiba was able to get back on his feet during the mid-skip by following his instincts once more, then dig his heels into the ground to slow down and come to a halt. Kiba glanced over his shoulder in time to see the prone Naruto lying against the tree vanish in a distinctive puff of smoke, unaware that Naruto had used a lot of chakra in that final blow. When did you Naruto smirked and interrupted, when I first sent that batch of clones to Kurenai-sensei, before assuming a taijutsu stance. Naruto's academy-based taijutsu simply wouldn't hold up against Kiba's Inuzuka fighting style. Even the few techniques he had learned from the medic books would be extremely beneficial, especially since he and Kabuto hadn't yet reached the combat situation material. As a result, he was vastly outmatched by a more agile and skilled opponent. There would have to be subterfuge. Lucky shot, but it won't happen again, Kiba swore, unfazed that Naruto's clone had nosed as well. Kiba's instincts screamed with excitement at the prospect of a worthwhile fight, and the boy was improving to the point where he could almost be considered a rival. Naruto simply made a hand seal in response to Kiba's promise, and then a dozen clones appeared from a cloud of smoke that was equally positioned on the left and right. The baker's dozen of blonde containers instantly attracted Tenchi's best kunai before being thrown at the smiling Kiba, who dodged them with the greatest ease. As soon as Kiba realized Naruto's strategy, he moved to get closer once more, this time using scent alone to locate every clone. Kiba quickly dispatched 3 of the blonde's copies with a single swipe of his claws, scattering the clones with his charge. The boy sidestepped one blonde's attempt to sneak up on him and then destroyed him too, this time with a powerful blow to the back of the head. When Naruto realized he was losing ground quickly, he began to think of new ways to interact with Kiba. For obvious reasons, Taijutsu was not an option, and Naruto didn't think he could use his kenjutsu against a target so quickly. That left genjutsu and ninjutsu, which didn't seem to be doing as well. Given that Kiba's sensei was Konoha's genjutsu mistress, it was unlikely, but Kiba never missed an opportunity, as demonstrated by the clone trick used at the start of the battle. As another clone scattered back into smoke, Naruto cautioned, "I need to time this right." Kiba was having a great time distributing his copies, and if he didn't act quickly, Kiba would soon be doing the same to him. As he unmolded his Shikyaku no Jutsu, 4 legs technique, Kiba yelled, "Naruto, watch this. I just managed to get it down yesterday, so I may not be able to control it too well." When Kiba began flitting through another set of hand seals, this time a little longer than the last, Naruto raised an eyebrow and dropped into a deep guard stance. Kiba exclaimed, "Here it comes, Suga," and then he leapt into the air, his body contorting into a tornado the size of a man. Both Naruto and his clones remained motionless in shock until the chakra whirlwind struck, tearing into 3 more clones before Kiba screeched to a halt. Kiba teasingly said, "Yahoo, I scored big on that one. Now let's see if you can dodge it again?" before launching into yet another chakra frenzy. Naruto was better prepared for the attack this time, and he finished his futon Bufu in time to encounter Kiba's flying fangs after slowing Kiba down with a few clones. The loud display of the 2 chakras colliding shows Kiba's fangs scraping against Naruto's chakra filled winds. When he saw the impasse, Naruto pushed more chakra into his hands, making the jutsu stronger just enough to send Kiba flying into a nearby tree. "This is my opportunity." As soon as Naruto realized this, he flew through the hand seals to the Nensogo no Jutsu, Sense Discord technique, also known as the Fundamental 5 Genjutsu, with practiced precision. By focusing mind altering energies on Kiba's dazed form, Naruto used his chakra to trick Kiba's optical nerves into believing he had vanished. The dog boy appeared surprised when he turned around, searching frantically for the blonde, never realizing that a genjutsu was active. The fact that Naruto had infiltrated the Uchiha family a few years prior was demonstrated by his skill, which allowed him to get a foot from behind an Inuzuka without anyone noticing, or so he believed, as he crept closer with incredible stealth. The victory was short-lived, though, as a pop and smoke immediately followed the decisive blow, leaving Kiba to wonder, "Had I missed a clone?" Kiba yelled, "Do you take me for a fool? I could smell your ramen-covered scent from a mile away," before punching at thin air and knocking Naruto completely off his feet. He responded by striking him in the head with a flaming fist, which pushed his face into the ground and rendered him unconscious long enough for Naruto to lower a flaming kunai to his neck. "Do you submit?" Naruto inquired gravely, watching for any kawarimi or similar jutsu. "Aye. Do you submit?" Naruto repeated, applying a little more pressure with his kunai this time. Childishly, Kiba exclaimed, "Fine, I submit, happy, you frickin' won again," upset that he had lost yet again. After hearing Hinata's laughter, Kiba swore, "It's not fair, I even used my best jutsu against you, and you still win." Kiba simply stamped off toward Kurenai's genjutsu lesson, giving the pale Hyuga a betrayed look. The girl called after him and said, Kiba-kun, I didn't mean it," but the dog boy was already too far gone to hear her mild voice. "Let him go, Hinata, he needs to learn to keep his emotions in check," Shino guessed, placing a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. The bug boy knew that Hinata had not meant any harm by her laughter, and he felt that Kiba was justified in constantly making fun of the girl for her situation with Uzumaki-san, but Kiba, like many Inuzuka, was very arrogant and had been stomped all over again in front of the girl he liked. In some ways, however, Hinata was just as unaware as Naruto. Kiba was constantly lusting after her, trying to win her over with his strength tests, but the girl had eyes only for the blonde, to the point where he would challenge Naruto to spar just to get Hinata to look at him. As Shino reflected on the lone, normal, Inuzuka, he concluded, now only if Kiba were more like his sister this problem wouldn't even exist then. Like him, she was the voice of reason among a group of overly emotional, in her case passionate, people, which made her an excellent choice for an insightful conversation whenever the team got together at the Inuzuka residence for team-building exercises. Recalling the many D-rank missions the Inuzukas had rented them out for, Shino added, "At least Hana-san doesn't make us clean the kennels." Dispelling the idea of dog droppings from his mind, Shino returned his attention to the scene in front of him, particularly the newcomer at their brief meeting. Uzumaki Kasumi was the epitome of a young woman, with long hair, killer curves, and a dangerous smile that could drive an Aburame crazy. She was everything a man could want, And the worst thing that could have happened to Hinata was that she was kidnapped when she was only 5 years old. It didn't matter to the girl that they were related because inter-clan marriages were common in her family, and it didn't matter that they were just friends. Hinata could see that Kasumi saw in Naruto someone worth admiring, possibly someone worth loving. It was a wonder Naruto didn't ask Kasumi out right away. Hinata felt pitiful, not even confident enough to meet her rival's gaze head on, and she briefly met the red-headed girl's gaze before averting her eyes from the taller girl's eyes as her jealousy boiled up inside her. Kyuubi cut right through all of Hinata's self-loathing thoughts when he said, "Naruto, you go ahead and spar with Shino, and while you do that I think I'll test myself against Hinata-chan over there." The girl instantly became a nervous wreck on the inside, terrified to death of losing in front of her crush, and that feeling was only heightened when Naruto gave the redhead an incredulous look, as if openly mocking her ability as well. Little did Hinata realize that his shock was not about her skill but rather Kasumi's current fragility. Kyuubi unintentionally cut Hinata down by making her the last pick, when he said, "The Hokage cleared me this morning. He said take it easy and test myself, so that's what I plan to do. And seeing since Kiba decided to storm off and you and Shino are about to duke it out, I figure Hinata would be the best choice." What Hinata missed of Kasumi's conversation with Naruto was the look that made it clear that, "I'll explain later, just trust me for now." The blonde did, and Kyuubi led Hinata away from the clear, much to the silent relief of the frightened Hyuga heiress. As Hinata continued to fidget under her gaze, Kyuubi asked slyly, "So how do you want to go about this? All-out taijutsu, or do you simply want to help me get back into form?" It was cute in a pathetic way, but the girl's confidence would be a major issue should the need arise for her to act without hesitation. In reality, Kyuubi saw it as a favor not only for Naruto but also for the entire village, since another capable soldier could only be helpful in the future. After a moment, Hinata managed to splutter out, "W. What ever why? Why? Why.uw? W. Want you Uzumaki? S.san." But she could feel her resolve eroding, but she refused to give in, refusing to make herself appear any worse than she already did in the face of her opposition. She would be strong, she would be confident, she would be a Hyu. "Kasumi, no San. No Uzumaki, just Kasumi. And yeah, I think we should have a full spar. I am way too rusty for going over the forms to help me." Hinata stammered, If why? Why.you insist, before lowering herself into a cat stance. Kyuubi simply arched an eyebrow at Hinata's form, wondering why she had chosen not to use Hake right away. Before assuming a stance herself, Kyuubi joked, "Maybe she's just being nice." In contrast to Hinata, who was standing upright with both arms out in front of her and one leg slightly bent, Kyuubi had adopted a deep stance that was almost reminiscent of the legendary Hake the Hyuga use. Hinata stutteringly exclaimed, Is she mocking me?" Her speech impairment was not due to a lack of confidence, but rather to her shock at the woman's haughtiness. Although Hinata was aware that she was not the best Hyuga fighter and that her younger sister was more skilled in both Jiyuken and the Byakugan, she knew that she would not be trampled by her rivals because she admired Naruto too much to give him up without a fight. Without saying another word, the two clashed. Kyuubi was rusty, as she had promised, but for good reason. It had been more than 1,000 years since she had last engaged in combat in her human form, the last time being that devoted night when she discovered the Tengu King's true scheme. Kyuubi pushed the surfacing bundle of emotions back into their proper place and concentrated on the task at hand, realizing that breaking Hinata was a prerequisite for fixing her, and for a nearly immortal fox demon, that was something they excelled at. Kyuubi could see the similarities between the girl's Jiyuken and the ancient fighting style of the last of Tenkai's avatars, but claiming that Hinata was as skilled as the ancient warrior monk would be equivalent to claiming that a domestic cat was as fierce as a wild Konohien tiger. There was a painful crack as Hinata's head snapped back when the heel of Kyuubi's palm collided with her chin, followed swiftly by a low sweep that left her awkwardly airborne before Kyuubi's elbow crashed into her sternum, knocking the wind from her lungs and sending her tumbling to the ground. Thus, she moved with the utmost ease through the girl's palm strikes, paying no attention to them because they lacked the killing intent to do any real damage before landing her first strike. The strength of Kyuubi's style was that she used extremely accurate nerve strikes by flowing the energy of her blows throughout her opponent's body and into ultra-sensitive areas. Hinata was willing to move her body and only later realized that both Kyuubi's elbow smash and palm strike hit two distinct pressure points. This realization made Hinata want to whimper in agony, but not from the pain of the blows, but rather from the pain of knowing that she couldn't compete at her current level. "Kami, I'm rusty. Those two strikes shouldn't hurt me like this," Kyuubi declared out loud, a little impressed that Hinata could move her body naturally to lessen the damage she took from the blows. This wasn't planned, rather, it was the result of extensive practice. Kyuubi grinned to himself, realizing that if Hinata was that good even when she didn't believe in herself, she would be amazing once she learned to love herself, but first they would have to go through this. Kyuubi spat arrogantly, "Come on now, we aren't finished yet," hoping to arouse the small Hyuga's wrath at the very least. As though summoned, Hinata stood up and returned to her cat stance, her legs swaying. Kyuubi continued to attack, saying, "Pathetic, you can't even use the true Hake," before launching herself once more. Her blows were merciless, and she relentlessly pounded at Hinata's defenses, tearing them down gradually but steadily as she disabled the girl's nerves one by one. Hinata fell to her knees, feeling insignificant in the face of an opponent who defeated and denigrated her in such a manner. It was unfair. She was not as talented as her younger sister, nor was she gifted like Neji. She was just a little Hinata who enjoyed pressing flowers and reading about medicine, the girl who liked to watch her crush from a distance and give him gifts when she thought no one was looking, the Hyuga who aspired to be a doctor like Lady Tsunade Sama, and the one who wished to be called the Hokage's wife one day, but now that was all gone, as this girl would likely do all that and more, leaving her with nothing. Kyuubi taunted the girl once more in an attempt to get anything from her. "So that's it. That's the depth of your dedication to your family's taijutsu, your admiration for Naruto, your pride as a person," was his latest insult. Hinata said in a low voice, "Why should you care?" She was far too long to stutter when speaking, and her battle with words was something she wanted in life. Now, she just wanted it to end. Kyuubi jibed, "Because you aren't a person to quit so easily." Taking those nerve strikes proved that, which caused the slouched Hinata to look puzzled. The pale girl wasn't prepared for this. She assumed Kasumi would dismiss her coldly before claiming Naruto as her own, thereby putting the final nail in the coffin. B. Buddha. The joke was not lost on Hinata, but it made the heiress wonder how Kyuubi would know that. "No buts. You were a Hyuga, you should have pride enough to take a compliment when it is given," Kyuubi ordered in a lighthearted tone that sounded like one of the Hyuga elders. Hinata muttered, "My father doesn't seem to think so," reverting to herself. Deprecating behavior. In all honesty, Kyuubi was growing tired of trying to give the girl confidence, so she chose to adopt a different strategy, a straightforward one. The pale girl was so shocked by Kyuubi's roar that she looked at the red-headed Kunoichi in wonder. "So what? Why should you care what he thinks? He is not lord of your body. He cannot force you to feel. He is not your lord of your mind. He cannot force you to listen. And he is not lord of your spirit, so he can never force you to give in." Thus, those exact words were the same ones her mother had said to her whenever the elders told her that she was too soft or too kind. Once more, she wondered how Kyuubi knew this. Kyuubi abruptly interrupted the girl's private slumber with the question, "Hinata, do you know what lions do to their cubs in the wild?" Hinata managed to leave after saying, Noah, because she didn't like the direction the conversation was taking. They throw their beloved children off the side of a cliff, knowing that in the world we live in, it would be better for them to be dead rather than strong. Now, I can't speak for your father directly, but it sounds like he is applying this theory to you. He needs you to be strong, not for him, not for the clan, but for yourself. So it is up to you to find a way to climb up that cliff, and believe me when I say this, we aren't in the wild, and he'll help you if you come and ask him," Kyuubi said, kneeling down to Hinata's level as the two females searched each other's souls. Hinata didn't find any deceit in Kasumi's words, and Kyuubi saw resolve in the eyes of the typically troubled girl. At that moment, they both grinned. Kyuubi yelled, "Let me help you up," and then tapped a few release points to stop the heiress's spasms and assist her in standing up. Despite the sinking sensation in her chest, Kyuubi persuaded, "So now that we've seen eye to eye, is there anything you want to tell me, anything pertaining to my blonde cousin in particular?" Hinata was shocked when Kyuubi simply gave her a toothy grin and exclaimed, "What, you know about me and Naruto-kun?" Kyuubi muttered out loud, expressing her thoughts as they came to her. "Hina-chan, I doubt that there isn't a soul in the village that doesn't know. Well, possibly Naruto himself, but he can be an idiot sometimes. Count Kiba in there as well, seeing as he's in denial about the whole thing," she said, reducing Hinata to a stuttering mess once more at the revelation, and despite the evidence of Kiba's predicament, Hinata continued to be unaware of his affections. Kyuubi sarcastically joked, "Typical, the one chick who really falls for him has someone lusting after her as well. And guess what, they're exactly the same when it comes to someone liking them." Hinata muttered sadly, "It's not like it matters, I'll never be able to get his attention," once again displaying herself. consciousness. Kyuubi baited the hook by saying, Hina-chan, believe when I say this, Naruto may be a rock when it comes to emotions, but even he has its limits. You just have to know how to find him. And Hinata's head snapped in her direction as though beckoning. Sinker, line, and hook. Hina-chan meet Icha Icha meet Hinata, and thus the Hyuga heiress's corruption started. Even though he lost, Naruto found that fighting Shino was one of the most enjoyable experiences he had ever had. Not to say Kiba was a slouch, but Shino was leagues ahead of his hot-headed companion when it came to strategy and using it to manipulate your opponent. Having silk-spinning insects that could make chakra imbued silk as strong and flexible as ninja wiring also helped a lot. Wow, Shino, I didn't know you had different breeds of Kikai insects, let alone how many things those guys can do, Naruto exclaimed joyfully. Naruto mentally declared, seriously, I doubt there is no end to what Shino can do with those guys, and crossed off Shino as one of the many opponents he would love to face once more. Yes, the Kikai have been bred by my family for generations. I'll be sure to look you up when I've acquired a new breed, Uzumaki-san, Shino said quietly, pushing up his glasses. Naruto smiled as famously, as if he was equally eager for a rematch with him, but in his own private, Aburame way. They reached their destination only to be met with a few glares, ending the unusual bond between the loudmouth and the recluse. They understood Kiba's glare because their fight took a lot longer than his, but Kurenai's was a little intimidating because of her red eyes and genjutsu abilities. The boys were about to be strung up by their toes in an all-too-real genjutsu when a rough voice interrupted. Come on now, Kurenai cut them some slack, they just got back from a spar. Plus, didn't the blonde leave some clones to listen to your lecture? Naruto thanked Kami, glancing up at the chain smoking Sarutobi Asuma, for actually being able to talk Kurenai out of something he would later regret. Kurenai said, sure, but if he doesn't get the fundamental theorem of genjutsu because he was off fighting, I won't have a pity for him, having a thorough understanding of Naruto's clone's amazing notes. Yeah, but I'm sure it won't come to that. You were there and witnessed the children's facessa, or rather, the faces of his clonisa when you taught them the water camouflage technique, or Suimisai no Jutsu. Thank goodness, Asuma calmed the red-eyed woman down by telling her, believe me, that's a demonstration they, and he, won't soon forget. Where is Hinata now? Playing mother hen to her tiniest of genin chicks, Kurenai inquired. Oh, Kasumi-chan and she are sparring. However, I'm a little concerned because Hinata is a Hyuga and likely much stronger than she admits. I'm hoping Kasumi-chan stays safe. This was the guy that the said Hyuga had a painfully obvious crush on, and here he was speaking only good things about her, and still he did not realize how much she liked him. Irony was like karma. Both of them were bitches. However, Kasumi did say the Hokage cleared her for training, whatever that may mean, and Hinata looks like the type to go easy on someone. Naruto rattled off, receiving a dumbfounded look from everyone around him. Kyuubi interrupted, pointing out Team 10's presence as she made her way to the small group, saying, Hinata-chan here were easy on me, and as a result I got a few hits in. Her explanation forewarned everyone of the nasty bruise that was forming on the tip of her chin, and after the initial blow, Kyuubi made sure to avoid getting too close to the face out of respect for Hinata and to avoid raising suspicions. Fortunately, the girl was wearing a heavy jacket, so none of her subsequent blows were as severe. Before examining the bruise, Naruto asked, Hinata-chan, are you alright? His green glowing hands cupped the blushing girl's face, and he paid no attention to her embarrassment, instead focusing on the disappearing blemish. This again caused astonishment because, lo and behold, the proof was literally right below his nose, but Naruto was still unable to see it. I appreciate it, Naruto.kun. Would you be able to teach me how to do that? After her conversation with Kyuubi, Hinata realized that talking to the boy she likes isn't the most embarrassing thing in the world. Her face turned a deeper shade of red as she asked, barely stuttering. Sure. Naruto also stammered, taken aback by the request, but he couldn't help but smile because Hinata had demonstrated to him that he was needed and wanted. Nevertheless, obtaining permission from Hinata's sensei remained a challenge, but it appeared that Asuma had that taken care of. Asuma whispered in the attractive Jonin's ear, see, and you thought that was a waste of time, and the girl gave him a small shiver in return. He knew that he was getting close to her, and soon she would be his. As the two gazed up at her, Kurenai thought, damn that Sarutobi, always fogging up my brain, and now where was I? Oh, yes, letting Naruto teach Hinata might just be a good idea. The girl has always been too timid to be a true front-line attack, and although she has shown aptitude in genjutsu, her heart has always been in healing. Yes, this might even just be a great idea. Hinata will get to spend meaningful time with her crush, and I'll get a med nin in the process, Kurenai thought. I don't see a problem with that, and she already has half the cup size, Kurenai remarked blandly, thinking about her student's generous bust with envy. She wasn't particularly envious of her student because she wasn't a girl with a flat chest either, but there was a persistent rumor that girls with large chests became med nins. Hinata would appear to be just another figure in that statistic. Cool, thanks Kurenai. Sensei, now I finally have a partner for those joint practice exercises, Naruto exclaimed with delight. Kyuubi, somewhat irritated that she was being completely ignored, questioned, couldn't you just have asked me or made a shadow clone for that? We both know you don't like healing, and the fact is right now you completely suck at it, Naruto shot back, referencing Kyuubi's attempt to use Yuki to heal him. That must have been the most agonizing thing he had ever gone through, along with a kick to the crotch. An argument broke out as usual, and Kyuubi embarrassed himself in front of everyone, which made Naruto complain in a way reminiscent of Kiba. His outburst put him squarely next to a laughing Asuma who was getting back up on his feet. Asuma whispered, "You owe me Kid 1, because Kurenai usually doesn't like replanning anything," as he passed by during his route to his team. Naruto mentally equated, he just stopped me from calling him Kuma-chan in front of his students, before glancing over Team 10. In his opinion, the Ino-Cho-Shika trio were always good people, at least, Choji and Shikamaru were. Naruto only put up with them. Despite the fact that they had a lot in common, the blonde had nothing against the girl, but her domineering demeanor cost her points. Her manipulative tendencies did not either, but Naruto reasoned that since they were shinobi, that was a desirable quality. However, Naruto set aside his thoughts and allowed curiosity to override analysis. Realizing that this was likely their attitude toward everything work-related, Naruto asked the team that was relaxing, "So what are you three doing here?" Shikamaru pointedly remarked, "Asuma Sensei dragged us here, even though he said it was our day off," giving the angry Jonin his most menacing scowl. "Hey, I said we wouldn't be taking any missions, not completely forgetting about training," Asuma clarified. Based on the tone of his voice, it seemed as though he had reviewed that at least a dozen times in that morning alone. Ino added, "While this has been fun, Kurenai-san," acknowledging the woman with the crimson iris. Ino began, "I have plans for a," but then her eyes widened and dilated. Choji's unexpectedly fast actions prevented Ino from collapsing backward after she lost all feeling in her legs. His unusual motivation was unquestioned, though, as Ino started to tremble in Choji's arms and mumble something unintelligibly before becoming quiet. She became enraged. She was shaken to her core by a ferocious scarlet, not just any red. This was the color of a demon, the color of blood, and the color of murder. As they emerged from the sea of crimson, Ino felt herself pushing past her fears and looking forward, her eyes searching every change. The blood of countless men was spattered on the walls. Every time she stepped on the red life fluid, it splattered sickeningly on the hardwood floors. She was feeling queasy from the stickiness beneath her foot, but the actual disgusting scene was in front of her. Sakura was sprawled out on the floor there. Her eyes were half-lit with consciousness, and her pretty pink skin was matted with blood that wasn't her own. But Ino wasn't freaked out by the look in her eyes or the blood in her hair. She released the contents of her stomach due to the loss of her right arm and the subsequent flood that flowed freely from the stub of an arm. Ino fell to her knees and kept drying heave when a suffocating ocean of ki entered her field of vision. Above Sakura's mouth, the demon of crimson light, the avatar of fear, formed inaudible words. Under those soul-piercing ruby eyes, everything seemed insignificant in his wake, including the blood. Splattered black and orange vest, the dirt, matted blonde hair, and the ripped ceiling that exposed 3 floors of floors above him before reaching the dying daylight. Before everything became hazy, Ino asked herself, "Is that Naruto?" Before the pictures of Choji, Shikamaru, Asuma, and Naruto appeared, a familiar voice exclaimed, "I think she's coming too." Ino started to dry heave once more when he saw the blonde, even though he didn't look demonic, as Choji held her hair. "Are you alright?" the fat boy inquired anxiously. Ino had never heard him speak in such a manner, but it didn't matter if they were all going to perish. As she struggled to her feet, the blonde girl cried to herself, "I have to get out of here." Everything seemed trivial compared to the fear that was building inside of her, including beating Sakura, winning Sasuke, and even sticking to the fatso and bum. "How are you, Ino?" Choji pressed once more, and this time the blonde gave a feeble nod. Ino met his eyes and, although she was a little reluctant, she managed to free herself from his hold and stand up on her own. After surveying all the anxious faces, Ino quickly averted her gaze when her gaze fell on Naruto, the fear of his other form rising inside her once more. I believe it is time for us to depart. Asuma interrupted. Sorry Kurenai, your genjutsu lesson will have to wait. He picked Ino up before he fell out again, just in time, as Ino lost consciousness once more, which made the normally relaxed Jonin step with a little more urgency. In an attempt to start a conversation, Naruto said, well that was weird, now wasn't it, before striking the back of the head with a sandal. Kyuubi yelled, that was for being insensitive, before heading back into town. Naruto realized that he was already running late for his meeting with Anko, so he reluctantly sighed and followed Kyuubi, knowing that he wouldn't like what the crazy snake woman had planned. Go ahead and enjoy yourself, I'll be right back. In addition to being sober, Anko's surprise was that Naruto was officially introduced to explosive tags. He was permitted to actively pursue creation, altercation, and detonation. It was as if his birthday had arrived early when Anko laid the paper and ink out in front of him and told him to get started. Naruto was so engrossed in the opportunity to fulfill one of his favorite fantasies that he failed to notice Anko and Kyuubi both leaving the room. Will he notice that we're gone, in your opinion? Puzzled by the enthusiasm her warden was displaying over a little piece of paper, Kyuubi inquired. Anko chuckled, you kidding? I doubt if they were announcing free ramen for a month he would notice, and then channeled some chakra along the room's walls, causing a plethora of seals to flash along the bare walls and floor, entirely unabated by the room's furnishings or decorations. The red-headed vixen was the epitome of beauty, with long hair, flawless curves, and a bra size that would make some girls green with envy. The only issue with that was that it made it difficult to see the exact lines Anko would need to graft to her body in order to finish the seal halfway fixated to her body. Kyuubi swiftly undressed at the signal of the flashing seals, casting her summoned clothes aside and exposing her to the special Jonin. It was difficult being one of the few people in the village who studied seals because there were only a few others and even fewer that she knew personally, but it had become necessary because of that bastard snake sensei she once had. Pushing that particular training of thought back down from where it came from, Anko continued to focus on her work, grateful that the red head had half finished it for her. Anko didn't even know why a girl so young needed reinforcement seals already, but the Hokage ordered it, and she would supply it. You're quite skilled at fuinjutsu, you know. You ought to think of it as a specialty. There are already far too few of us, and another woman in the field would undoubtedly be a gift from Kami Sama himself, Anko continued, causing Kyuubi to grin. Kyuubi said, mockingly innocent, if you only knew Anko. Sana, I've thought about it, and I might give it a try. She studied the Uzumaki sealing techniques diligently for 2 weeks, but she was still unable to find a way to accomplish her objective. The only thing she wanted more than the death of that wretched bird demon was a body, a real flesh and blood body. But the task was becoming increasingly difficult because, in addition to the Uzumaki seals being extremely difficult to decipher, breaking through the barrier between life and death was no easy feat. For the first time, Kyuubi worried that her efforts might be in vain. It's going to take more time, a time I may not have, she thought. Nobody in Konoha was prepared to withstand a real raging demon's attack. The partially finished reinforcement seals, no longer able to keep up with her own blows as she brushed off her taijutsu, simply wouldn't cut it. Even she wasn't sure she could defeat him even if she had her body back. Kyuubi yelled to Anko, I'm ready when you are, in an attempt to shed some of her vulnerability. After saying, okay, but no screaming though. The silence wards have been installed yet, Kyuubi's body began to ache blindingly. Gazing over his father's, almost, weapon, Naruto exclaimed, I can't believe how light this thing is. Naruto was astounded by the weapon's light weight, even though he was still unable to extract the blade, and that was before the sheath was added. When he first sparred with Tenten, it was clear that he was not a weapon specialist. However, during his time at the Higurashi dojo, he came to understand what a top-notch weapon should feel like. With its perfect balance, weight, and even length for fighting, this was unquestionably the best. But the blonde's inability to extract the amazing weapon from his casing was a constant source of annoyance, to the point where he eventually confronted Tenchi about it. After finishing his warm-ups, Naruto asked, Tenchi, Sensei, why is it that I cannot draw on the blade from its sheath? Is there a seal of some sort preventing me from doing so? He warmed up by deflecting kunai, just like he had done in his first training session, but this exercise forced him to use his body as efficiently as possible. In essence, he was making himself ambidextrous because he would have to use his right arm as his sword arm to deflect any kunai that came from the right, whether it was high or low, behind or from the front. The same was true for his weaker left arm. Trying to learn how to use a limb he had had all his life was exhausting, boring, and painful. Thankfully, the process was accelerated significantly by the resetting of his muscles, which is roughly the same as employing 100 shadow clones to learn a jutsu. Despite being a high-level and intricate form of jutsu that would take a long time to master, a shadow clone aided jutsu. Naruto, however, thought it was all worthwhile since any suffering and annoyance were welcome if it taught him how to use a weapon his father intended to use. Yes, but not in the way you think. Originally, this ninjutsu was made with the intention of channeling the Shinigami's power, so that the Undaime-sama may be able to slay the Kyuubi rather than seal it, Tenchi explained, both impressing and annoying Naruto. The blonde was stunned to learn that the fabled death god technique, which could bind demons, could be used without resorting to the traditional suicide method. Although it gave the user even more ability to defeat their enemies, it was most likely still a suicide technique. Tenchi's explanation was annoying, though, because he referred to Kyuubi as it, rather than a specific person. Naruto realized that the annoyance was unjustified because 2. The man had lost his wife that day, and 3. Neither Tenchi nor any of his other sensei knew Kyuubi's true identity. Naruto regretted ever having any bad feelings for the man after recalling that conversation. He literally lost his wife while attempting to save his father's. Rewind 3 years before. In other words, it was a typical sunny day in mid-June, making it ideal for him to slink out of his work at Tenchi's shop and practice with some of the shuriken in the back. However, Naruto discovered that the upscale store was closed when he got to the double-wide structure, which was sandwiched between 2 other stores. When the blonde 10-year-old slid open the door and discovered it hadn't been sealed yet, he thought, weird. Once inside, Naruto discovered that all of the tasks had been completed. The weapons had been polished, the floor had been swept, and the orders had been completed. The spooky feeling that was starting to creep into the back of his mind was only made worse by seeing this. Naruto concluded that Tenchi had most likely spent the entire night in the forge and neglected to close up again as he made his way to the rear of the store, where the stairs leading to the basement were located. Tenten said, "I wouldn't go down there," directly behind Naruto's ear, sending the boy flying through the air. Tenten could not help but laugh quietly as she looked up at the blonde who looked like a scared cat. The already tense blonde picked up on the oddity right away, adding yet another strange element to the day's events. When Tenten simply shook her head, with that same muted aura emanating from her once more, Naruto asked inquisitively, "Why, has it not been cleaned again? Or is Tenchi-san working on a special project again?" Tenten set off innumerable alarms in the boy's mind by explaining, "No, it's clean. But today is just one day that my dad doesn't want to be disturbed." Unless she was upset, Tenten never referred to Tenchi as dad. Someone felt wrong about the entire situation, so Naruto asked hesitantly, What's wrong?" As Tenten said, "It's nothing really, just a private little day me and my father both take to ourselves to remember someone." Her eyes were distant. Naruto was struck by it then. The birth of Kagome Higurashi took place on this day. When Naruto celebrated the holiday with the 2 weapons enthusiasts, he felt terrible because he had soon discovered that the woman's death actually occurred on the day he was born. They immediately made fun of it, emphasizing that she would want them to be relieved that their country was safe and not to have to deal with the grief of her death. They did so out of respect, but they also held a moment of remembrance on the day of her birth. "Oh, I'm sorry, I'll just go Thina," Naruto muttered as an excuse. Since he had never known his own family, he imagined that Tenten and Tenchi's suffering was comparable to the anguish he experienced when he contemplated what he had lost. There were moments like that when he recognized that being by yourself had at least one benefit. No one was there to witness your lowest point. Tenten also muttered, "No, you don't have to go," with her back to the boy. The blonde simply stared at her in shock, a little taken aback that she would share this time with him. Although the gesture was extremely humbling, Naruto found it to be extremely valuable because he realized that he was at least welcome in one place. Tenten found that Naruto's bright smile, though a little more subdued than usual, had lifted her spirits on this otherwise gloomy day. "Okay," he muttered. Final flashback as Naruto remembered the remainder of that day, the memory restored that same subdued smile to his face. That day, he had discovered a great deal about Tenten and her family. He discovered that, in stark contrast to her husband, who was arguably the world's most forgetful man, Kagome was an extreme perfectionist who insisted on keeping the house spotless. In an attempt to give the impression that the woman was still alive, Tenten and Tenchi got up early that day and thoroughly cleaned the house. He also found out that Kagome was a weapon specialist, just like Tenten. The comrades who saw her sweeping the battlefield like an unstoppable windstorm, her weapons cleaving and skewering any opponent she encountered, gave her the nickname, the Wind from the East, even though her skill was sufficient to earn her the rank of Jonin. Last but not least, Naruto discovered a lot about himself that day, at least in a roundabout way. He found out that Uzumaki Kushina's teammate Kagome had fought on the front lines during the final moments of the Kyuubi attack in order to stall and give her husband time to complete the weapon that was supposed to kill the fox in its tracks. It was a pointless stand because Tenchi was unable to complete the weapons in time, forcing the fourth to carry out his original plan, which ultimately led to both his and his wife's deaths. Tenchi was so shaken by the failure that he gave up being a shinobi and turned his attention to his craft as a means of atoning for his previous transgression. Tenten, who admired her mother so much that she aspired to be like her, was the most obvious of the many voids Kagome left in her loved ones' lives, Naruto realized. Her father and many others believed it to be a kind of remembrance of the woman who had passed away, but Naruto knew better. He had discovered on that day 3 years prior that Tenten did not obsessively practice weapons in order to imitate her Mothera, at least not completely, but rather to preserve her mother's memory for her father. To put it mildly, it was a noble gesture, and Naruto felt honored to be aware of it. Out of that honor, he made the commitment to never tell his sensei about it. After losing his wife, the man was already in a mess, but hearing that his daughter was always trying to be strong for him might make him lose it. Returning to the previous topic and putting the somber thoughts aside for a later moment, Naruto questioned, "So does that mean I can never draw out the full potential of this sword?" With words about his future, Tenchi unwittingly assisted Naruto in suppressing any thoughts of that day. Probably not, unless you can somehow find a way to channel a Shinigami's power without losing your life. However, after the attack, I adjusted the seal so that the day I gave it to you it would begin feeding on your chakra, attuning itself to you, so that when the process is complete it will become your blade, Tenchi explained. Naruto muttered, his thoughts entirely shifted. Cool, so I guess it'll be up to me to name this thing as well then, won't it? The boy's mind was full of names with odd and genuinely unsettling origins, but none of them seemed to fit. Tenchi said, "I suppose you will, but then again it would only be fitting that you name the sword's brother as well," which made Naruto glance up at the enormous man. "Oh, of course you wouldn't know, you were a baby the time, but when I was creating this sword I made a companion blade. It really was a request by your father when he ordered the sword made. One for him and one for Kushina, so that if the need should ever arise that the Shinigami needed to be used again his successor would have the tools readily available," Tenchi explained, implying that Kushina was going to after the fourth passed. After giving it some thought, Naruto inquired, "So where is the blade now?" in an attempt to find out where his mother's sword was. Tenchi's solemn response, "Wherever the Yondaime and his wife were laid to rest, that was my last gift to them," opened Naruto's previously closed mind. Practice was going to be difficult that day because Naruto's thoughts were always on other things. "Report," the man with the bandage hurriedly said. For this specific person to hear and comply, his voice needed to be barely audible above a whisper. Enbu, wearing a white cloak, sat on a knee and started telling his superior what he had seen over the previous 2 weeks. He had been observing ever since Uzumaki Naruto was discharged from the hospital. Until today, at least, he was always concealed and his intentions were never overtly hostile. His attack on the fox woman was designed to be as vague as possible in order to lead any potential investigators in a number of different directions that completely obscured his tracks. His superiors, especially Danzo, appreciated this person's speed, efficiency, and cleanliness. Like their personal ninjutsu, he was identical to the weapon he carried on his back. He was flawless in every way and concealed from prying eyes, which increased his lethality. Good, our dear Naruto-kun seems to be progressing at a phenomenal rate. The time for us to recruit him may be soon upon us. However, what of the woman? Does the fox suspect anything? Danzo asked as the soldier stood up. A warrior unlucky enough to survive this man's first greeting had to contend with the crushing presence he simply emanated by virtue of his presence, even though he did not initially appear to be an intimidating figure. Looking into the shinobi's eyes, however, was what was really damning for those who were cursed with even worse luck. The eyes of the soulless and damned, the obscured green irises sang of untold stories and visions that no man should see and could survive. When the white-clad wraith finally said, "No," Kyuubi took a moment to reflect and consider whether he could somehow relate this to his superior. With that, the man vanished, leaving no trace of his soundless, smokeless, and sealless shunshin. "Excellent, you've once again proven your worth 1,000 times over. You are dismissed for the time being. Report back at the usual time for your next assignment," Danzo said. As he wrote a letter to his associate in the wave, Danzo rattled off, "Now for the next step, to no one in particular. An employment suggestion. that was more appropriate for Naruto's present developing abilities would be required prior to his first trial. Danzo whispered, "Yes, that is much more appropriate," and then he called forth a very big, black bird. Danzo tied the message to its leg, and since the summon was already tuned into his thoughts, he didn't have to command it. With silent wing beats, the dark messenger took off into the night sky, carrying the catalyst to disaster on its leg.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.